Elden Ring is absolutely packed with map details, hidden references, and subtle environmental storytelling that the vast majority of players walk right past. So I spent months scouring every corner of the lands between to find exactly 407 of them. I put this video together because Elden Ring's map is one of the most densely layered game worlds ever made, and when you look closely, almost every location tells a story the game never explains out loud. The hardest part of assembling it was deciding what to leave out. I kept the focus on things that are visible on or connected to the actual map, things you find by exploring. I left out most of the pure item description lore, not because it is not fascinating, but because I wanted this to feel like a journey through a place rather than a reading list. I also made a choice to move through the regions roughly in the order a first-time player would encounter them, rather than by theme or faction, because I think that ordering reflects how the world reveals itself organically. Before I move forward, I'm counting on you to support my channel by clicking that tiny subscribe button so that we can spread these amazing videos to folks like you around the world. Thank you. Alright, let's start in Limgrave, which is where almost every player begins their journey in the lands between. It seems like a straightforward starting region, but even here, the map is doing things that most people never stop to think about. Number 1. When you first appear in Limgrave after the tutorial, you're standing at the first step site of Grace, and the Erdtree is directly in front of you. This is not an accident. The game is built around the idea that the Erdtree is the natural horizon point of everything in this world. Every region is designed so that the tree is visible from nearly any open location, and the starting position makes sure the first thing you see when you enter the lands between is that golden light on the horizon. It functions like a compass. You are always aware of where the center of this world is, and that awareness shapes every decision you make about where to go next. Number 2. The very first enemy you encounter on your way out of the tutorial, the Soldier of Godric, has a name most players gloss over. He is not just a random soldier, he is specifically Godric's soldier, meaning he was stationed at the exit of the tutorial cave as a kind of watchman. One possible reading is that Godric, who is obsessed with collecting and grafting the power of others, placed soldiers at this passage specifically to intercept weakened Tarnished before they could become threats. The tutorial space is supposed to be a place outside of normal time and geography, and having one of Godric's men guarding the exit suggests that Godric's reach extends into places it probably should not. Number 3. The Church of Elech sits on a slight rise at the edge of Limgrave's coastal area, and if you look at its architecture, it is clearly older and more worn than almost everything around it. Cale the merchant tells you to visit the church, and it becomes your first real hub. But what is interesting is the Erdtree seal visible on the stonework of the ruined church walls. This suggests the church was once part of a functioning religious establishment tied to the Erdtree faith, and its current ruined state points toward the Long Night or some earlier catastrophe that predates even the shattering. The building has been crumbling for a very long time. Number 4. There is a grace site just outside the Church of Elech's walls, separate from the one inside. Grace sites in Elden Ring emit golden wisps that rise and float toward the Erdtree, and watching the direction these wisps travel gives you navigational information. The ones near the Church of Ella point slightly northwest, which is the direction of the Erdtree's base in Leyndell, even though Leyndell is many hours of gameplay away. This is either a genuine navigational aid built into the world or a remarkable coincidence in the environment design. Either way, it works. Number 5. Margit the Fell Omen is the first major boss in the game, and his placement at the Stormhill path to Stormvale is deliberate world design. If you read his description and the item lore surrounding him, Margit is not a loyal soldier of any demigod. He is an omen, a class of beings in the Elden Ring world associated with cursed horns that grow from the body. Omens are considered abominations by the Golden Order and are typically imprisoned or killed at birth. Margit's presence here, guarding a castle, suggests he was either hired or coerced into this service, and the fact that a powerful omen serves a demigod like Godric points toward how desperate the political situation in Limgrave must have been after the shattering. Number 6. The map fragment for Limgrave is found in the Gatefront ruins, a collapsed military checkpoint near the main road to Storm Vale. The fact that the map is found here, in a ruined military post, suggests that geographic knowledge was considered strategically important and was stored in places soldiers and officials would pass through. Many of the map fragments across the lands between are found in similarly ruined outposts and camps, which one possible reading suggests means cartography was a function of the military rather than of scholars or merchants. The Erdtree Academy would have had its own maps, but the road maps belonged to the armies. Number 7. Agheel Lake, the large body of water in central Limgrave, is home to the dragon, Agheel, who appears when you walk into the ruins in the middle of the lake. What is interesting about Agheel is his name. Most named dragons in the lands between have names tied to their element, location, or lineage. Agheel's name does not immediately connect to the other named Limgrave inhabitants, which suggests he is an outsider. One possible interpretation is that he arrived in Limgrave after the shattering, when the old order that kept dragons contained broke down. Dragon incursions into previously forbidden territories is a recurring theme in the region, descriptions throughout the game. Number 8. The ruined stone archways, scattered throughout Limgrave's field, areas are not random decoration. If you pay attention to their orientation, many of them seem to once have formed connected pathways or passages. The ones near the Gatefront ruins point roughly towards Stormvale Castle, which suggests they were part of an older road system that predated the current dirt paths. The fact that these arches are still standing, while everything around them crumbled, suggests they were made with a particularly durable material or were magically reinforced at some point. The current paths wind around them rather than following them. Number 9. There is a wandering merchant near the Mistwood ruins who sells a note called Note, Walking Mausoleum. This note explains that the walking mausoleums are ancient structures that roam the lands between carrying the preserved husks of demigods inside them. What is notable about this merchant being in Mistwood, specifically, is that the Mistwood itself has a strange howling sound you can hear when walking through it tied to Bled's appearance. The merchant's presence here, selling information about death and preserved bodies next to a forest associated with a half-wolf spirit connected to a dead witch, feels like the game quietly layering its themes on top of each other. Number 10. The Stormfoot Catacombs on the western coast of Limgrave are one of the first catacomb dungeons you encounter. Inside, the enemies are imps, small stone-like creatures that lunge from walls and decorative sconces. The Stonesword keylore describes these imps as creatures sealed into the catacombs to guard the things buried inside. If you think about who would have done the sealing and why, the answer points toward the original builders of the catacombs, who are likely Golden Order priests who believed the dead should be preserved and protected. The imps were guardians, not just monsters. They are doing exactly what they were made to do, which is a detail that makes them a little harder to feel good about killing. Number 11. There is a specific cliff along the western edge of Limgrave, just south of the Church of Ella, that has a small drop down to a hidden ledge with a chest containing a twin blade. This weapon is not particularly remarkable for its stats, but it is placed in a way that rewards players who actually look at the terrain rather than following the road. From Software games have always rewarded this kind of lateral thinking, and this chest is essentially a gift for players who look at a cliff edge and think about what might be below rather than what is ahead on the road. It is a small philosophy of exploration encoded into the map. Number 12. Near the seaside ruins on the southeastern coast of Limgrave, there is a cliff overlooking the ocean where a small camp of soldiers has set up, facing outward toward the water. The dragon-burnt ruins nearby were clearly devastated by dragonfire at some point in the past, and they sit right on that coastal edge, suggesting the sea was a boundary that something powerful once crossed. The soldiers standing at the cliff's edge and staring out at the ocean is one of those small environmental details that does not have an obvious explanation and is more interesting for that. Something happened here, or something is expected, and the game is not telling you what. Number 13. The dragon-burnt ruins contain a cellar with a chest that teleports you to Celia Crystal Tunnel in Caelid, one of the most infamous trap chests in From Software's history. But beyond the obvious trap, the chest's existence here points toward an interesting detail. Someone placed this teleporter deliberately. It was not a natural magical occurrence. Someone who wanted Tarnished to end up in Caelid, specifically in a cave full of hostile miners and scarlet rot, put this trap in the ruins. The identity of that person is never revealed, but the implication that the ruins were being used as a sort of ambush point adds a layer of active malice to what looks like a simple ruin. Number 14. Along the road near the Stormgate, you will find enormous tree roots that have pushed through the earth and broken the path apart. These roots belong to the Erd tree, and their presence this far south suggests the tree's root system extends across virtually all of Limgrave. The fact that the roots are surfacing at the Stormgate specifically is interesting, because the Stormgate is a natural choke point between northern and southern Limgrave. One possible reading is that the Erd tree's root growth responds in some way to the concentration of life and activity above ground, which would mean the paths people travel are also the paths the roots tend to follow. Number 15. The Bestial Sanctum in Dragonbarrow, which you can reach via a portal in northeastern Limgrave, is home to Gurankh, the Beast Clergyman. When you stand at the portal site in Limgrave and look back toward where you came from before stepping through, you can see how deliberately hidden the portal is. It is placed off the main path behind a minor ruin, and nothing in the immediate environment suggests it is there unless you explore thoroughly or talk to D, Hunter of the Dead, who hints at its existence. This kind of navigational hide-and-seek is built into the DNA of Elden Ring's exploration philosophy, and finding the portal without help is one of the game's quieter rewards. Number 16. The Round Table Hold, which you access through the main menu rather than any physical location in the world, is described in its item descriptions as being located between the worlds. But when you look out of the Round Table Hold's windows, you can see sky and distant architecture that does not correspond to any location in the lands between you can physically visit. This has led to various interpretations. One possibility is that the hold occupies a liminal space, similar to the spaces between bonfires in Dark Souls, a refuge that exists outside of normal geography. Another reading is that it is simply a very distant and unreachable part of the lands between that Elden Ring never gives you access to. Number 17. There is a whetstone knife sitting on a table near the entrance to the Church of Eller that unlocks the Ash of War system when you pick it up. The lore of whetstones in Elden Ring suggests they are tools originally made by the ancient smiths who forged weapons for the demigods. Finding one here in a clearly ancient and ruined church points toward the idea that this region was once part of a more organised and maintained territory. Someone left this tool here, or it was stored here as part of the church's supplies, back when someone still tended to this place on a regular basis. Number 18. The coastal Limgrave area has a small island just offshore that you can see but not easily reach, where a teardrop scarab sits. Teardrop scarabs in Elden Ring are described as creatures that collect the memory residue of powerful beings, condensed into physical form. The fact that one of them sits on an isolated island, seemingly inaccessible, rewards players who either figure out how to reach it by jumping off a cliff edge, or who come back later with better mobility tools. Its placement on a hard-to-reach island suggests whatever it collected was intentionally isolated, perhaps belonging to someone who withdrew from the world completely and whose presence still lingers at the water's edge. Number 19. If you look at the southern edge of Limgrave's map, you can see the bridge that leads to the Weeping Peninsula. This bridge, the Bridge of Sacrifice, is clearly ancient, far older than the current political situation in the lands between. Its massive scale suggests it was built when the region was connected in a more organised way, possibly during the era of the Eardtree's original establishment. The bridge is now littered with ballista traps and enemy soldiers, which is a good example of how ancient infrastructure gets repurposed by whoever holds the territory at any given time. The permanence of the structure outlasts all of the temporary conflicts happening on top of it. Number 20. The gatefront ruins have a set of broken stone tablets that appear to have had inscriptions on them at some point. The text is too weathered to read now, but their positioning near the road suggests they were either directional markers or memorial stones. Throughout Elden Ring, you will find similar stone markers at key junctions and ruins that suggest a civilization that once maintained a network of public information, road signs, and records, all of which has decayed into illegibility after the shattering. The world had a bureaucracy once, it had a public record, and all of that is gone, leaving only the physical shapes of words that nobody can read anymore. Number 21. Near the War Master's shack in Limgrave, you'll find a tarnished named Knight Bernal, who sells ashes of war. The War Master's shack is named for a War Master, and Bernal being here suggests he or someone before him was considered a military instructor or strategist. The ashes of war he sells are combat techniques, which in the context of Elden Ring are the preserved memories of past battles. The idea that a tarnished is sitting in a ruined military post selling the memory of ancient combat is one of those quiet details that underscores how the world is running on the residue of a greater past. Even the fighting styles of ancient warriors survive as tradable knowledge. Number 22. The Stormhill area north of Margit's location has several large statues of armoured warriors placed along the road approaching Stormvale. These statues are clearly meant to be intimidating, a display of military might by whoever controls the road. But the style of the statues is older than Godric's rule. They predate him, which one reading suggests means Godric simply inherited an already imposing road and built his claim on top of pre-existing power symbols. This is actually very consistent with everything we know about Godric as a person who collects and repurposes things. He did not build this grandeur, he just moved into it and called it his. Number 23. The Stormhill shack is occupied by Roderica, who eventually moves to the Round Table Hold and becomes a spirit tuning merchant. When you first meet her, she says she feels drawn towards Stormvale and talks about the chrysalids there. Her language is oddly dreamy and disconnected, which some players read as her being mentally touched by the spirits she can commune with. Her presence in Stormhill just before Stormvale is not coincidental. She was drawn here by whatever pulls her towards spirits, and the concentration of death and violence in and around Stormvale creates a powerful attractor for someone with her sensitivity. She got as close as she could, and then stopped, hovering at the threshold. Number 24. There is a walking mausoleum visible from Limgrave that moves through the grassy plains to the north, near the Stormgate area. These structures lumber along, enormous stone buildings, on stone legs, going about their ancient business while the entire world has shattered around them. The fact that they continue to function following whatever path they were set on long ago is one of the game's most understated images of a world that continues to run on its old systems even after everything that powered those systems has collapsed. They were built to wander forever, and they are still doing exactly that, indifferent to the chaos. Number 25. There is a tarnished invader named Mad Tongue Alberich, who invades you in the Round Table Hold if you approach the lower region of the hold. His presence as an invader inside what is supposed to be a safe haven is one of the first breaks in the illusion of the hold as a sanctuary. The hold is accessible to any tarnished who receives its invitation, and that apparently includes those who have turned against the idea of seeking the Elden Ring. This invasion suggests that the hold's peace is a fragile social arrangement rather than a magical protection. Anyone guided by grace can enter, regardless of their intentions. Number 26. The Murkwater Cave in Limgrave is where you first meet Patches in the game, unless you have played other From Software titles and new to check. Patches has been a recurring character in From Software's games for over a decade, appearing in Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Dark Souls 3 in various forms. In Elden Ring, he is introduced in a classic trap scenario, pretending to be friendly before locking you in a treasure room with hostile enemies. The specific detail worth noting here is that Patches follows his usual pattern regardless of the game world, unchanged across centuries, as if the same opportunistic soul keeps appearing wherever there are ruins and unsuspecting travellers. Number 27. After you spare Patches in Murkwater Cave, he eventually sets up shop near the scenic Isle Site of Grace in Liurnia, then later near Volcano Manor, then at the Shaded Castle. The fact that he keeps moving and you keep running into him is partly a running gag and partly a reflection of how a certain kind of person survives in a collapsing world. He has no allegiance to any faction or cause. He just wants to make a profit, which in a shattered world actually makes him more practically coherent than any of the demigods fighting over a broken ring. His persistence is almost admirable when you think about it in those terms. Number 28. The cave behind a waterfall in Limgrave. The High Road Cave contains wolves, and the way the cave is structured, with water running through it and a natural arch at its entrance, suggests it was once used as a shelter, possibly by the early inhabitants of Limgrave, before the cities and castles were built. In Elden Ring, wolves are associated with blood and the concept of loyalty, and finding them here in a natural cave rather than in any constructed space suggests they inhabit the older, pre-civilization parts of the world. The wolves have been in this cave longer than most of the ruins have been ruins. Number 29. The map of Limgrave, when you first unlock it, reveals that the eastern terrain has an unusual topography of ridges and depressions that does not match the gentle rolling hills of the western side. The eastern Limgrave transitions hard into Mistwood, and the landscape there is choppier and less open. The ancient history of the lands between includes an era of giants who walked the earth and physically reshaped the land they crossed. The topographical quirks of Limgrave's eastern terrain suggest that at some point the landscape was physically disturbed by something much larger than anything that currently lives there. Number 30. The Mistwood itself is one of the more atmospheric locations in Limgrave. When you enter it, the music shifts to a quieter, more unsettling ambient track, and you occasionally hear a howl that seems to come from somewhere inside the forest. This is Bled, the half-wolf spirit companion to Ranni the Witch, and the howl is his way of getting your attention so he can meet you. The mechanic of hearing a sound and seeking it out is pure exploration design, and it works because the Mistwood is genuinely dense and disorienting enough that following a sound requires real attention. You have to actually listen and navigate toward it. Number 31. Just inside the Mistwood, near its centre, there is a ruin with a teardrop scarab on the upper level that is easy to miss because it's above eyeline. Items placed in elevated positions in Elden Ring often reward players who think vertically about space rather than just moving along the ground. Finding this one requires you to figure out the path up the ruined walls, which is a small but satisfying puzzle built into the geography of the location itself. The game does not prompt you to climb. It just places something interesting up high and waits to see if you notice it. Number 32. The minor Erd trees scattered throughout Limgrave, smaller versions of the main Erd tree, are locations where a concentrated form of the Erd tree's grace accumulates. In the Limgrave region, there are a couple of these glowing golden trees, and they are always visible from a distance, just like the main tree. Their item descriptions and the descriptions of the Erd tree avatar bosses that guard them suggest the minor Erd trees are physical manifestations of the Erd tree's root network breaking through the surface, like bioluminescent growths emerging from an enormous underground organism that spans the whole of the lands between. Number 33. The third church of Marika in eastern Limgrave contains a sacred tear and a flask upgrading item, which makes it practically significant. But it also tells you about the Erd tree faith's distribution of power. There are multiple churches of Marika throughout the lands between, each holding an aspect of her spiritual presence. The fact that they are numbered, first church, third church, and so on, suggests there was once a formal network of these sites managed by the Golden Order, a state religion with a distributed infrastructure that has now largely been abandoned. The numbering system implies organisation, and the absence of any current caretakers implies collapse. Number 34. Near the third church of Marika, there is a portal that takes you directly to Farum Azula, the ancient city of dragons floating above the storm clouds in the far north. This portal is one of the most dramatic hidden discoveries in Limgrave for players who find it without knowing it is there. You step through what looks like a shimmering gate, and suddenly you're standing on ancient stone bridges, with lightning all around you and dragons circling below. It is one of the most jarring transitions in the game, and encountering it early means facing content that is far too difficult for your current level, which is exactly the kind of fearless world design that Elden Ring embraces throughout. Number 35. The Summonwater Village in eastern Limgrave is a flooded ruins area where death butterflies and wandering spirits create a uniquely quiet, haunted atmosphere. The village is associated with D, Hunter of the Dead, who talks about destroying undead spirits that refuse to pass on. The water flooding the village is an interesting environmental detail. There is no obvious explanation for how this inland village became submerged, and one possible reading is that the disruption of the natural order during the shattering caused underground water sources to overflow, gradually drowning areas that were once dry. This village was swallowed from below rather than destroyed by violence from above. Number 36. In the Summonwater Village, there is an Erd tree burial watchdog boss in the catacombs below the flooded area. The watchdog is described as a construct made by the Erd tree faith to guard burial sites, and finding one here in a flooded, half-forgotten village suggests that the Golden Order's burial practices extended even to remote settlements. The Order clearly had a strong interest in ensuring that the dead stayed dead and stayed where they were put, which speaks to their anxiety about the kind of undeath that could theoretically result from the misuse of the Rune of Death. The watchdog is still doing its job in a drowned catacomb, which is a grim kind of dedication. Number 37. Along the road between central Limgrave and the Stormgate, there is a large golden tree, separate from the minor Erd trees, with grace extending from it. These golden trees, called Erd tree branches, mark places of significance to the Erd tree faith. Some of them are found near old graves or ruins, suggesting they grew in places where something connected to the Erd tree's power was buried or where something significant once happened. The fact that golden light pulls around them and enemies tend to avoid them suggests they still carry some residual protective power, even now that the Golden Order is in chaos and nobody tends to the faith. Number 38. The border between Limgrave and Caelid. That hard visual line where the golden green of Limgrave turns into the red-orange of Caelid's scarlet rot is one of the most striking environmental transitions in the game. You can stand at that edge and see both biomes simultaneously. The sharpness of the transition suggests the scarlet rot spread rapidly and then stopped at a natural geographic boundary, the ridge and the river that separates the two regions. It did not spread gradually outward in all directions the way a natural contagion might. Something about the geography contained it, at least on this side. Number 39. Fort Haight in southeastern Limgrave is occupied by Godric's soldiers and contains an early accessible boss. But what is interesting about Fort Haight is its name and positioning. Haight suggests height, elevation, and the fort sits on a hill overlooking the coastal approach to Limgrave from the east. It was clearly a watchtower-type fortification, built long before Godric's forces occupied it, designed to spot threats coming from the sea or from Caelid's direction. The soldiers stationed there now are fighting a battle that has nothing to do with the fort's original strategic purpose. The building was repurposed like almost everything in this world. Number 40, the Limgrave underground area, the Siofra River Well, can be accessed via a lift in eastern Limgrave. When you descend and come out into the Siofra River area for the first time, the scale of it is genuinely overwhelming. You are suddenly in a vast underground space with ancient pillars, a glowing underground sky, and deer wandering peacefully through it. The visual impact of this discovery is maximised by the contrast with the surface world. You go from the grassy plains of Limgrave into an enormous underground biome that looks like nothing above ground, and the game gives you no preparation for it. It is purely a reward for curiosity and patience. Number 41. The walking mausoleums in Limgrave, when you watch them closely, occasionally turn and change direction. Their movement is not completely random. They seem to follow routes that roughly circumnavigate the region they inhabit. This suggests they were programmed, in the fantasy sense, to patrol specific territories. The question of who programmed them and for what purpose is left unanswered. But the description of mausoleums as structures containing the remains of demigods suggests they were created by the Erdtree faith as a way of preserving powerful individuals in a state of eternal procession, wandering forever through the world they once commanded. An immortal parade for the permanently dead. Number 42. There is a jellyfish spirit in Limgrave near the Stormhill Shack, floating along peacefully. Jellyfish in Elden Ring are associated with Roderika's spirit world connections, and finding one near where she sits suggests she's been unconsciously attracting spirits to herself. The specific detail here is that the jellyfish does nothing. It simply floats and drifts away if you approach it, which is unusual for a creature in a world where everything else attacks on sight. Its docility makes it stand out as something that belongs to an older, quieter version of this place, a remnant of when this hillside was not a staging ground for a siege. Number 43. The Calu Baptismal Church on the Weeping Peninsula contains a sacred tear and a flask upgrading item, and it sits near a field of flowers that are unusual for the peninsula's generally grim landscape. The church, like the other churches of Marika, is ruined but still radiates grace. The flowers around it suggest that the land immediately around an active grace still maintains some of the natural beauty of an earlier era. The corrupting influence of the shattering has not reached directly into the immediate vicinity of these holy sites, at least not yet. There is a small bubble of something older surviving around each one. Number 44. The Weeping Peninsula gets its name from the constant rainfall that covers it, and if you look at the map, the peninsula's geography channels water downward into a series of streams and pools. The ruins scattered throughout are all partially waterlogged, and the enemies, the soldiers, the undead, the demi-humans all appear worn down and soggy. The environmental storytelling here suggests a place that has been slowly drowned in misery over generations, not in a single catastrophe, but through the accumulated weight of neglect and the literal weight of endless rain. The name is on the map, and the map tells you exactly what to expect. Number 45. At the very southern tip of the Weeping Peninsula, there is a cliff overlooking the sea where a small camp of soldiers has set up, facing outward toward the water. These soldiers are not facing inland toward any obvious threat. They are looking out to sea. One reading is that they were posted there as lookouts for something approaching from the ocean, which connects to various theories about the history of the lands between and whether things crossed the sea in the distant past. The game never confirms what they were watching for, which leaves the question sitting there unanswered, like so many things in this world. Number 46. Castle Morn in the southern Weeping Peninsula holds the grafted blade greatsword, one of the most visually iconic weapons in the game, and it sits at the throne in the castle's innermost chamber. The weapon's description connects it to a massacre, a site where many warriors were killed and their blades fused into one enormous weapon. Castle Morn itself seems to have been the site of a more recent massacre as well, since the castle is overrun by demi-humans who have killed or driven off the human soldiers. The detail that the weapon was forged from a massacre and is found in the middle of a recent massacre suggests the castle has a recurring relationship with mass violence, as if the land here invites it. Number 47. The Tombswood ruins on the Weeping Peninsula are positioned in a slight depression, surrounded by grave markers. The name makes it explicit that this was a formal burial ground, but the ruins at the centre do not look like a church or a monument. They look like a residential structure built in or near a cemetery, which might suggest that whoever lived here was involved in the maintenance or management of the dead, perhaps a family of gravekeepers. The idea of people who lived their entire lives among the graves, tending to the dead as a profession, reflects the Erdtree faith's significant preoccupation with the proper treatment of the deceased. Number 48. Near the fourth church of Marika on the Weeping Peninsula, there is a road leading south that passes through a small village ruin before hitting the church. The village appears to have been abandoned rather than destroyed. There are no bodies, no signs of violence. The people who lived here simply left. In a game world where most ruins are the result of battles, fires, or catastrophe, a quietly abandoned village stands out as something different. It suggests the people who lived here fled in an orderly way when they sensed what was coming, which raises the question of what they sensed and where they went. Number 49. The Ailing village on the Weeping Peninsula is notable not just for what is there, but for what the name implies. A village named Ailing exists in a game where disease and rot are major themes. The specific ailment of this village is never identified directly, but the environmental details, the hunched figures, the dim light, the silence, suggest something chronic and gradual rather than a violent attack. This village may point toward an early manifestation of some spreading sickness, a hint that the corruption visible in Caelid is not as contained as it appears to be from the border. Number 50. There is an Iron Maiden enemy type in the Impaler's Catacombs on the Weeping Peninsula that is a direct reference to the historical Iron Maiden torture device, dressed up in the Elden Ring aesthetic. Its placement in a catacomb that also has imps and fire traps suggests the designers wanted to fill the underground spaces with things that feel genuinely ancient and cruel. The Iron Maiden does not just exist as a visual reference, it also physically impales you, which is a piece of dark humour from the developers, the kind of joke that lands because it is built into the mechanics rather than stated directly. Number 51. At the Earthbore Cave on the Weeping Peninsula, you will find a rune bear inside a cave, which is one of the more terrifying early encounters for players who wander in unprepared. Rune bears are described as bears that have absorbed an unusual amount of grace, making them larger and more powerful than ordinary bears. The fact that a bear with so much accumulated grace is living in an earthen cave suggests that the Weeping Peninsula has been steeped in grace for a long time. The peninsula's distance from the main political centres, might be why this kind of natural grace accumulation could happen undisturbed. Nobody was managing it. Number 52. The Bridge of Sacrifice connecting Limgrave to the Weeping Peninsula has its name right there on the map, and most players cross it early and do not think too much about why it is called that. The bridge is lined with golems and has ballista machines on its battlements, but the name itself is the detail. A bridge named Sacrifice implies that crossing it costs something, that it marks a threshold. In narrative terms, leaving Limgrave for the peninsula represents a commitment to going deeper into the broken world, rather than staying in the relatively familiar starting area. The map tells you the emotional weight of the crossing before you make it. Number 53. There is a Stone Sword Key imp statue inside the Impaler's catacombs that requires a key to unlock a fog door leading to extra loot. Stone Sword Key imp statues appear throughout the game, and they are a consistent world-building detail. The fact that this magic seal uses an imp statue, and that imps are the guards inside these very catacombs, suggests a connection between imps and the Stone Sword Key magic. Perhaps the imp statues were created as guardians that could only be dismissed by someone who possessed the corresponding key, meaning only authorized individuals could pass while everyone else was kept back by the stone seal. Number 54. The Morn Moan Grave in the far south of the Weeping Peninsula is a tombstone-dense area with a very quiet and desolate atmosphere. If you slow down here and look at the individual tombstones, rather than rushing through, many of them have carvings that are too weathered to read clearly, but a few have recognizable shapes, including what might be arms raised in supplication, a posture connected to worship of the Erd Tree. The density of the graves and their age suggests this was a significant burial site long before the current era, possibly one of the original formal burial grounds, established when the Erd Tree faith first organised its practices around death and remembrance. Number 55. Stormvale Castle is the first major legacy dungeon in Elden Ring, and its architecture is immediately distinctive. The outer walls are made from an older, darker stone than the towers and battlements built on top of them, which one reading suggests means Stormvale was originally a much smaller fortification that was expanded by successive rulers over centuries. Godric's renovations are visible in the grafting machinery and the chains and crane mechanisms that dominate the courtyard. He has added functional horror to an older defensive structure, layering his obsessions over whatever the castle's original purpose was. Number 56. The back entrance to Stormvale Castle, the hidden path that Gostock points you toward, is a detail that rewards players who listen carefully to NPCs. The path bypasses the main gate's cannon fire and leads through a cramped interior route. Gostock's suggestion of this path is presented as him doing you a favour, but he is also leading you through territory where he can observe and follow you, which he does. His helpfulness and his self-interest are completely inseparable, which makes him one of the more believably human NPC motivations in the game. He wants something from you. He is just clever enough to give something first. Number 57. Inside Stormvale, there is a room where the floor is covered in the remains of grafted limbs and bodies in various states of disassembly. This is Godric's workshop. The graphic nature of this space communicates something specific about Godric's obsession. He does not just graft power from defeated enemies as a one-off. He maintains an active operation for it, with dedicated space and presumably workers or servants who assist in the process. The sheer volume of discarded material in this room suggests the process has been going on for a long time, quietly, in the interior of the castle, away from whatever public face Godric maintains. Number 58. There is a notable detail at the boss fog gate for Godric the Grafted, where you pass through the fog and find yourself in a large courtyard that appears to have been a ceremonial or public space in the castle's original design. The large open area, the decorated stonework, the scale of it all suggests this was once used for gatherings or formal announcements. Godric's choice to use this space as his personal arena for destruction and grafting is another example of him repurposing architecture built for communal, dignified purposes into something that serves only his grotesque needs. The dignity of the space makes what happens in it worse. Number 59. Godric's second phase, where he grafts a dragon's head to his arm, is one of the more visually striking boss transitions in the game. The dragon head is described as belonging to a dragon that Godric defeated and dismembered. This connects to the tradition of warrior kings in ancient myth who claimed power by slaying monsters. But the implementation here makes it ugly rather than heroic. The dragon head is clearly still alive in some sense, being used as a weapon against its will. This is what separates Godric's version of power from anything heroic. He does not integrate it or earn it, he just attaches it and calls it strength. Number 60. After defeating Godric, you can find a small area in the castle near the exit that contains a grave marker for Godric's victims. This grave marker is easy to miss because it is off the direct path to the exit, but finding it changes the atmosphere of leaving Stormvale from triumphant to something more somber. You have defeated the monster, but the monster's victims are still here, still mourned by whoever placed that marker. The identity of the person who placed it, whether a surviving servant or a family member, is left entirely to your imagination. The game does not explain it, it just leaves the stone and lets you feel whatever you feel. Now we are moving into Liurnia of the Lakes, which is one of the largest and most visually striking regions in the game. Liurnia is where the Erdtree Academy sits, where Ranni's questline begins to take shape, and where a lot of the game's deeper lore about sorcery and the moon starts to emerge. Number 61. The transition from Stormvale through the Northern Gate deposits you at a site of grace overlooking a massive lake that stretches in all directions. The scale of Liurnia is immediately overwhelming after the relative claustrophobia of Stormvale, and the visual reveal of the Raya Lucaria Academy glowing in the fog in the middle of the lake is one of the best first impression moments in the game. The academy is built on raised ground within the lake, and the visual of a glowing magical institution sitting on an island surrounded by dark water is exactly the visual language you would expect for a school of sorcery. The fog keeps it slightly mysterious even after you know exactly where it is. Number 62. The lake itself in Liurnia is relatively shallow in many places, and you can walk or ride across large sections of it on horseback. This detail changes how you navigate the region. In most games, a large body of water on the map means you go around it. In Liurnia, you go through it, and as you do, you discover ruins partially submerged, creatures lurking in the shallow water, and distant views that are only available from the middle of the lake. The designers turn the lake into a traversal space rather than an obstacle, which rewards players who treat it as something to move through rather than around. Number 63. The 4 belfries on the western cliff edge of Liurnia are one of the more cryptic locations in the game. They are 4 towers with bells, and 3 of them contain portals to areas that are either cut content or remnants of earlier versions of the game. The 4th contains a chest with an imbued sword key, which is needed to activate the portals. One of the portals leads to what appears to be an early version of the Chapel of Anticipation, the tutorial area where the game begins. Going back there and seeing it from the other side, empty and echoing, is one of the stranger moments in Elden Ring. The 4 belfries feel like the game showing you its own archaeological layers. Number 64. Just south of the Academy, there is the location called the South Raya Lucaria Gate, a large stone door built into the hillside with an imp fog wall that requires stone sword keys to open. Behind it is a modest reward, but the interesting thing is the gate itself. It is the same architectural style as the Academy, suggesting it was once a formal secondary entrance to the Academy's territory. The fact that it's sealed now with a magical imp lock rather than staffed by Academy scholars suggests it fell out of use and was locked off at some point, possibly after whatever political rupture led to the Academy's current isolation. Number 65. The Rose Church in Liurnia sits on a small island in the southern part of the lake, and it is associated with White Mask Vara, the first NPC you encounter in the game proper. He is the one who calls you maidenless. The Rose Church is where his questline culminates, and the church's name and red flowers surrounding it suggest a connection to blood and the outer god of Rot, or to Moog's bloodborne faith. Finding this church by exploring the lake rather than following a linear path is a good example of how Elden Ring puts significant questline content in places you might easily miss entirely. Number 66. The Albinauric village in southern Liurnia is one of the most atmospheric locations in the game. The Albinaurics are a people described as artificial life forms, created through an imperfect attempt to produce life through sorcery. The village is populated by their frozen and barely animate forms, sitting or lying on the hillside as if they simply stopped one day. The connection between the Albinaurics and the academy above them, the institution that presumably created them, is not spelled out directly. But the proximity of the village to the academy on the map makes the relationship between creator and created very clear, even without explicit lore. Number 67. Near the Albinauric village, there is a half-sphere, jar-shaped object with an NPC inside named Hyetta, who is a finger maiden. She is blind and is searching for the guidance of a specific outer god. Her presence in the Albinauric village connects the village to the broader theme of beings searching for a higher power to serve, which is one of the core spiritual tensions in Elden Ring. The Albinaurics were made by humans trying to create life, and now Hyetta sits among them, trying to find a god to dedicate hers to. The layers of creation and devotion in this one small spot are remarkably dense. Number 68. Caria Manor in the northwestern corner of Liurnia is the ancestral home of the Carian royal family, and its approach through the hand-shaped magical obstacles and summoned spirit enemies is one of the more conceptually interesting dungeon designs in the game. The hands that push up through the ground and grab you are described as the hands of ancient Carian knights, still defending the manor from beyond death. The entire dungeon is an act of posthumous loyalty, the dead doing what the living ordered them to do long after the order was given. When you reach the top and face Royal Knight Loretta, you are fighting the last living guardian of a place protected by the dead. Number 69. After defeating Loretta in Caria Manor, you gain access to the Three Sisters, 3 towers behind the manor, where Ranni, Renala's daughter, has her base of operations. The towers are called Ranni's Rise, Rela's Rise, and Seluvis's Rise. Their names and their positioning in a triangle behind the manor suggest they were once a formal part of the manor's structure, perhaps an academic wing or a research area for the royal sorceresses. The towers are isolated now, accessible only after clearing the manor, and the fact that Ranni has chosen to operate from here rather than from anywhere more central says something about her desire to remain hidden. Number 70. The Finger Slayer Blade, a key item in Ranni's questline, is found in Nokron, the Eternal City Underground, but its connection to Caria starts in Liurnia. Ranni tells you to seek it out, and the fact that a blade designed to harm the 2 fingers, the divine messengers of the Eared Tree, exists at all suggests someone created it with the express purpose of attacking the established divine order. Finding it underground, in a city that predates the Erd Tree's establishment, suggests that resistance to the 2 fingers and the Erd Tree faith is older than most players assume. The opposition is ancient. Number 71. In Liurnia's eastern cliff areas, there are 2 hidden NPC sorcerers to find. One is Master Lusa, found in Celia, the hidden village of the Prophylaxis. He is a former student of Raya Lucaria, who sought starlight beyond what the academy could teach, and was driven mad or physically broken by what he found. The other is primeval sorcerer Azur, found near the Hermit Village on Altus Plateau. Both of them are frozen in place, unable to move or speak normally, their minds having touched something too large. Finding them in these remote, hidden locations emphasizes that the price of seeking forbidden knowledge in this world is typically isolation and transformation. Number 72. The converted tower in Eastern Liurnia has a puzzle mechanic built into it. To get to the item at the top, you have to jump on the outside of the tower rather than climbing interior stairs, because there are none. The tower's interior has been sealed. The jump sequence requires patience and precision, and the reward at the top is a memory stone, which is useful but not spectacular. The interesting thing is what the puzzle communicates. The original occupants of this tower sealed it from the inside, and the only way in is by going around the seal rather than through it. Who sealed it and why is, as usual, left unanswered. Number 73. The Revenger's Shack in Western Liurnia is a small building occupied by an NPC named Edgar, who is the father of Irina, the NPC you meet on the Bridge of Sacrifice in the Weeping Peninsula. If Irina dies as a result of the Castle Morn questline, Edgar appears here as a hostile invader. The name of the shack on the map, Revenger's Shack, exists regardless of whether Edgar is there or not, which suggests either that the map was built with his potential presence in mind, or that someone else used this shack for the same purpose of pursuing a grudge before Edgar got there. Either way, the name tells you exactly what the building is used for. Number 74. The Eastern Liurnia Lake Shore is an area most players move through quickly on their way to the Academy or Carrier Manor. But if you slow down and look at the ruins dotting the shallow water here, you can find submerged structures that appear to be older than the current ruins on the shore. They are the same stone as the Academy in some places, which suggests that at some point the lake's level was lower and these structures were on dry ground as part of the Academy's broader campus. The Academy appears to have been much larger once, or at least to have had more territory before the water rose. Number 75. The site of grace, called the Liurnia Highway South, is located on a major road running north through Liurnia, and if you follow this road north, it eventually leads toward the ruin-strewn precipice, which is the main path into the Altus Plateau without using the Grand Lift. This highway is one of the clearest examples of pre-shattering infrastructure that still functions, at least as a physical path. The road was clearly well maintained once, and following it gives you a sense of the lands between as a place that had a functioning transportation network, a civilization that moved goods and people along organized routes. Number 76. The crystalline woods in Liurnia are an area to the east of the main lake, where the ground is covered in crystal formations and the trees have taken on a glassy mineral quality. This transformation of the natural environment suggests exposure to a high concentration of glintstone energy over a long period. Glintstone is the magical medium through which sorcerers channel their power, and the woods being crystallized by it implies that the Academy's magical practices have been slowly transforming the land around them for generations. The woods are a physical record of centuries of magical overflow. Number 77. Raya Lucaria Academy's main gate is accessed via a seal that requires a specific Academy glintstone key to open, found on a dead scholar at the top of a small island with a dragon. The fact that a key is required at all, rather than a password or a ritual, suggests the Academy maintained strict physical access control. You needed the right item to get in. This is interesting when you contrast it with the fact that the interior of the Academy is in chaos. The key controlled who could enter from outside, but once inside, the scholars seem to have turned on each other completely. Number 78. Inside the Academy, the gravity spell rooms, where the floor contains flowing magical energy that lifts you upward, are some of the most original traversal design in the game. The magical mechanisms built into the Academy's architecture are not just decorative. They are functional systems that the scholars clearly used for moving between levels quickly. The fact that these mechanisms still work, even now that the Academy's in chaos, suggests they were built with self-sustaining power sources. The Academy's infrastructure outlasted the Academy's people. Number 79. Renala, Queen of the Full Moon's boss room, is inside a library, which is one of those details that says a great deal with very little. She is surrounded by scholars chanting her name, holding candles, and she sits in a bubble of magic, while a large chandelier and bookshelves burn around her. The library, as the setting for a battle against a broken queen of intellect, is appropriate in a way that feels deliberately symbolic. The burning books around her are her academy, her life's work, all of it going up, while she sits in the middle pretending nothing has changed. It is a deeply sad image when you let it land. Number 80. After you defeat Renala's first phase by breaking the golden barrier generated by the scholars, and then face her second phase, she transforms the arena into a moonlit outdoor space. This transformation, which takes place in what should be the interior of a library, suggests that Renala's power is tied to the moon specifically, and that at her full power, she could remake reality around her to match the conditions of maximum lunar influence. The second phase is not just a difficulty spike, it is a demonstration of what her power was before grief broke her. Number 81. The lunar altar in the far western cliff area of Liurnia, near the Three Sisters, is a location that has fallen off many players' maps entirely. It is a remote plateau that requires specific knowledge or exploration to reach. Up there, you find Dragon Communion Altar and some powerful items. The lunar altar's position at the edge of the world, directly west and aligned with the moon's position, suggests it was a site of lunar worship or astronomical study. Predating even the Carian family's presence in the area, the Carians studied the moon, and this altar may have been the foundation of that practice. Number 82. The town of sorcerers in eastern Liurnia, also called the Academy Town, or the small settlement near the Academy's eastern approach, is a small cluster of buildings where Academy students presumably lived or studied outside the main campus. The buildings are simple compared to the Academy's grand architecture, suggesting student quarters rather than faculty spaces. The enemies there are Academy glintstone sorcerers who have gone feral, still performing their spells but without direction or purpose. The image of students who are trained to think clearly, now mindlessly hurling magic at anything that moves, says something about what happens to intellect when its institutional context collapses. Number 83. There is a teardrop scarab in the middle of the Liurnia Lake, accessible only by going into the water and finding it, which many players never do because crossing deep water is not instinctive for most players. The scarab here holds an ash of war related to magic, which makes sense given its proximity to the Academy. The idea that a scarab is sitting in the middle of a lake, waiting, undiscovered, holding magical knowledge that nobody has claimed in a very long time, is a quietly melancholy image. The lake keeps its secrets patiently. Number 84. If you climb to the top of Rani's Rise and look outward, you can see a clear sight line toward the Erd Tree in the south and the Altus Plateau to the east. This positioning is not accidental. Rani chose this tower as her base, at least in part because of its sightlines. Someone operating in secret who also needs to keep watch would want exactly this kind of elevated vantage point. You can see who is coming from a long way off from the top of that tower, and from the outside, the tower is just one of three in a remote corner of a dangerous region. Number 85. The lakes of rot in Ansel River, visible from the map's underground layer, are described in item lore as places where the scarlet rot has concentrated underground and formed a slow, spreading body of toxic liquid. The fact that there are lakes of rot underground, separate from the surface manifestation of the rot in Caelid, suggests the scarlet rot operates from underground sources and surfaces in multiple places. This reframes the Caelid catastrophe as a surface eruption of something already present below, not an infection that started above and sank down. Number 86. The Belem Church in northeastern Lyonia is positioned at the top of a road that climbs out of the lake region toward the Altus Plateau. This road, through the Belem Highway, is one of the official entrances to Altus and was clearly once a significant trade and travel route. The church at the top of this road suggests that travellers were expected to make an offering or receive a blessing before ascending to the higher plateau, which was a common practice in many historical cultures when crossing major geographic thresholds. The church marks the transition point between regions both physically and spiritually. Number 87. Near the academy, there is a dungeon called the Raya Lucaria Crystal Tunnel, which can be reached through a specific cliffside path. The crystals mined here are described as glintstone, the material used in academy sorcery. The presence of an active mine this close to the academy suggests the academy depended on a supply chain of raw magical material, not just abstract knowledge. The miners who worked this tunnel were part of the academy's infrastructure, and the fact that they have now turned hostile or been replaced by constructs speaks to how completely the academy's operations have collapsed. Number 88. The purified ruins in southern Lyonia are described as having been purified of something, which raises the obvious question of what was there before. The ruins are near the route between the Weeping Peninsula Bridge and the academy. One reading is that the ruins were cleansed of rot or some other corruption at some point, which would connect them to the broader history of the scarlet rot spreading and being periodically contained. The word purified in the map name implies an active effort was made here, that this was not just a ruin, but a ruin that was deliberately cleaned up for some purpose. Number 89. The ruined labyrinth in the eastern lake area of Lyonia is a name that appears on the map for an area that is indeed labyrinthine. The ruins here seem to be of an older structure, possibly predating the academy's establishment in the region. If Lyonia was occupied before the academy was founded, the labyrinthine ruins might represent an earlier civilization's architecture, something built before the glintstone aesthetic of the academy became dominant. The maze-like quality of these ruins, combined with their age, gives them the feel of a place designed to confuse outsiders, perhaps defensively. Number 90. There is a grace site in the middle of the Raya Lucaria Academy, called the Debate Parlour, which is the room before Renala's chamber. The name Debate Parlour tells you about the space's original use. The academy was a place of academic discourse, and there was a formal room set aside specifically for structured debate. Finding this name in a room that is now an ambush zone full of magic-hurling scholars and crystal snails is a good reminder of the distance between what the academy was built for and what it has become. The institutional memory of the name survives, but the institution does not. Number 91. The way the Grand Lift of Dectus connects Lyonia to the Altus Plateau requires a specific item, the Dectus Medallion, which comes in two halves found in Fort Haight and Fort Faroth. This two-part key system suggests the lift was controlled by a security protocol that required two separate parties to both be present and willing for it to be activated. This is not paranoia. It is the kind of design you implement when you have something valuable on the upper level that you do not want just anyone accessing. The Altus Plateau, where the Lanedale capital is located, was clearly restricted territory. Number 92. The Einsel River Well, another underground access point found in Lyonia, takes you down to the Einsel River area where miniature Rani appears. The connection between the Lyonia surface and the underground Einsel River through this well suggests that the underground waterways physically run beneath Lyonia's surface lake. The water you see in the lake above may literally be connected to the water flowing underground, and the Einsel River may be one of the sources that feeds the lake from below. The geography of the lands between has a vertical dimension that most players never fully internalize. Number 93. Church of Vows in eastern Liurnia is a large church built in a style different from the other churches of Marika scattered around the map. Church of Vows uses turtle iconography extensively, and it is home to Miriel, a large tortoise who serves as a priest. Miriel explains that the Church of Vows was where the Erd-tree faith made formal agreements with the Carian royals, and the vow in the name refers to these treaties. The turtle imagery suggests patience, longevity, and the keeping of promises over long spans of time, which is consistent with what a tortoise priest would emphasize. It is the slowest and most enduring kind of religious dedication. Number 94. The ruin-strewn precipice, the path from Liurnia up to the Altus Plateau that does not require the grand lift of Dectus, is a vertical climb through a mining operation that has been carved into the cliffside. At the top is magma worm Makar, a dragon-like creature serving as the guardian of the passage. The route is not the obvious one. Most players find the lift before the precipice, but the precipice exists as an alternative, and the mine that was carved into the cliff face suggests that the miners who worked there were also, incidentally, the ones who maintained this access route. Mining and passage keeping were the same job. Number 95. There is a specific spot on the southwestern edge of Liurnia where the cliff drops away into a fog bank, and you can see nothing below. The fog here is permanent and not navigable downward, which means you cannot access whatever is at the bottom from this cliff. But knowing that there is a bottom somewhere makes you aware of how the lands between has depth beyond what you can access from any given surface point. The fog is not just a visual barrier, it is the game communicating that there is more to this world than you can currently reach from where you're standing. Number 96. There are Finger Creek enemies in Liurnia, specifically near the sites associated with the two fingers, and the Round Table holds correspondence. The Finger Creek enemies are associated with the Tonic of Forgetfulness and Sir Lewis's questline, which involves the manipulation of free will and memory. The distribution of these enemies on the Liurnia map clusters around locations that were connected to either the Academy or Carian politics, which suggests that the practice of using memory-altering substances was more widespread in this region than the game explains explicitly. Number 97. The scenic Isle Grace site in the middle of Liurnia's lake is a small island with a site of grace and nothing else on it. No enemies, no loot, no NPC, just the grace and the water around it. It is one of the most peaceful spots in the entire game, and sitting there and looking at the Academy across the water with the sound of wind and distant waves is genuinely restorative. This grace site functions as a rest point in the truest sense of the word, a place where nothing happens and you are simply allowed to exist in the world for a moment. Number 98. The Academy Gate Town, on the approach to the Academy's main gate, is a small settlement of ruins where the Academy's staff and visiting scholars presumably lived. The scale of it, and the variety of building types, including residences, a small plaza, and what appears to be a chapel, suggests a fully functioning community existed here before whatever crisis hit the Academy. The transition from the relatively intact-looking settlement to the chaos inside the Academy itself raises the question of whether the crisis started inside and spread outward, or whether it arrived from outside and the Academy sealed its gates against it. Number 99. If you look closely at the outer wall of Raya Lucaria Academy from the lake, you can see different phases of construction in the stonework. The lower sections of the wall are made from a different stone than the upper sections, and the junction between them is visible as a horizontal band of slightly different colouring. This suggests the Academy was expanded at some point, with new upper floors or battlements added to an existing lower structure. The original Academy was probably smaller and was built up over time as it became more prestigious and powerful. Number 100. The Moonfolk ruins in northwestern Liurnia are the ruins of a structure connected to the Carian royal family and their worship of the moon. The ruins are relatively simple, just stone foundations and broken walls, but their positioning in the northern part of the lake region, aligned with Caria Manor to the northwest, suggests they were part of an extended network of Carian-controlled or Carian-associated sites throughout Liurnia. The Carians did not just control Caria Manor, they had holdings throughout the lake region that are now ruins. Their influence was once much wider than its current trace suggests. Now we move up to the Altus Plateau, which is the elevated central region of the lands between, home to the Leyendell royal capital, the Shaded Castle, and some of the game's most layered political history. Number 101. The Altus Plateau is visually distinct from Liurnia immediately upon arrival. Where Liurnia is flat, misty and blue-grey, the Altus Plateau is golden and open, with a warm light that comes from the proximity of the Erd tree. Everything on the plateau grows taller and greener than the regions below, and the scale of the Erd tree itself becomes more imposing when you're on roughly the same elevation as its lower reaches. This visual shift is one of the ways the game communicates that you are approaching the centre of power in the lands between. Number 102. The Altus Plateau contains a significant number of Erd tree avatars, the large golem-like guardians that protect the minor Erd trees. The density of these guardians on the plateau, compared to Limgrave or Liurnia, reflects the proximity to Leyendell. The minor Erd trees on the plateau are closer to the heart of the faith, and they are correspondingly better protected. The presence of multiple avatars in a relatively small geographic area suggests the Golden Order maintained particularly strong supernatural defences around the approaches to their capital. Number 103. The Shaded Castle in the northern Altus Plateau is a moat-surrounded fortress that sits in a basin below the level of the surrounding terrain. It is literally shaded, receiving less direct light than everything around it, which gives it a permanently dim and cold atmosphere. The castle is notable for being one of the locations most heavily associated with the Perfumer faction, a group of alchemists who used perfumes and potions in their fighting style. The castle's purpose and its connection to the Perfumer faction is not clearly explained, but the scale and defensibility of the structure suggest it was a significant stronghold for someone. Number 104. Within the Shaded Castle, there is an area of still green water that is poisonous. This is one of those environmental details that rewards slow, careful navigation over rushing forward. The poisoned water looks almost exactly like regular shallow water in the castle's layout, and many players walk into it and immediately start taking damage. The detail here is not just the trap itself, but what the poisoned water says about the castle's history. At some point, whatever was stored or happening here contaminated the castle's own water supply, which would have made the castle uninhabitable for anyone without specific resistance to the poison. Number 105. The Sainted Hero's Grave in the northern Altus Plateau is one of the more elaborate catacombs in the game, featuring the chariot traps that have become iconic in Elden Ring's underground dungeon design. The chariots of burning fire roll through the tunnels on fixed tracks, and navigating around them requires patience and pattern recognition. The lore behind these chariots is that they were funerary processions built to honour great warriors, the fire a symbol of the warrior's blazing spirit. The fact that the same fire used to honour them now kills everyone who enters is either a dark irony or a feature rather than a bug. Number 106. There is an NPC named Hermit Merchant on the Altus Plateau, found in the Hermit Merchant's shack near the cliffside. This merchant is isolated, living alone in a small structure, far from any settlement, and he sells a variety of items including materials for crafting. The detail here is his name, Hermit. He has chosen to live alone, separate from the chaos of the Shattering's aftermath, in a spot on the map that most players pass through without stopping. His shop has exactly the kinds of supplies that someone who has been living off the land for a long time would have accumulated. Number 107. The Wyndham ruins on the southern Altus Plateau are large enough to suggest a significant settlement once existed here. The ruins have a graveyard area, a tower remnant, and foundations that indicate multiple large buildings. The scale is comparable to a small town rather than just a camp or outpost. Given the location between the Grand Lift of Dectus and Lanedale, this settlement was probably a waypoint on the road to the capital, a place where travellers could rest and resupply before the final approach to the city. Its size made it vulnerable, and whatever destroyed it left enough damage that it has never been resettled. Number 108. Lanedale, the royal capital, is visible from nearly everywhere on the Altus Plateau, and the way it is designed architecturally makes it look like the city grew out of the base of the Erd tree. The golden architecture blends with the golden roots and the golden light in a way that makes it genuinely difficult to tell where the city ends and the divine begins. This visual blending is intentional. Lanedale was built to be an expression of the Erd tree's power in physical form. The city is not near the Erd tree. The city is part of the Erd tree's presence in the material world. Number 109. The outer wall of Lanedale is enormous, a defensive perimeter of a scale that suggests the city was designed to withstand sieges from armies that no longer exist. The gates are proportionally huge, suited for processions of the kind you might expect for a divine monarchy rather than for practical military use. This scale says something about the original purpose of Lanedale. It was built as a statement of power rather than as a practical fortress. The enormous gates were never meant to hold against enemy armies. They were meant to impress anyone approaching the city with the scale of what the Erd tree and its faithful had built. Number 110. Inside Lanedale there are enormous dragon bones and a dragon corpse, the remains of Fortisax woven into the city's architecture. The dragon is half buried in the stone of a major boulevard, and its skull forms part of the street level at one point. The presence of a massive dragon corpse incorporated into the city's infrastructure, rather than removed, suggests that this dragon's death was either ancient enough that it became part of the city before the city was built around it, or that the city deliberately incorporated it as a monument. Fortisax was Godwyn's companion, and the treatment of the body suggests reverence rather than conquest. Number 111. The Crucible Knights patrolling Lanedale are described as warriors from the very earliest era of the Erd tree, predating the current Golden Order. Their armour bears traces of the Crucible, the primordial fire from which all life in the lands between is said to derive. Finding them still active in the capital suggests they were not just honorary guards but are sustained by something deeper than normal loyalty, possibly by the proximity of the Erd tree's power at the centre of the city. They have been here since the beginning, and they are still here now. Number 112. The Erd tree's roots inside Lanedale have broken through buildings, streets, and walls throughout the city. Where the roots in Limgrave surfaced only in a few places, in Lanedale they are everywhere, pushing through everything. The city is essentially being slowly consumed or embraced by the tree, depending on how you read it. One possible interpretation is that the Erd tree is reclaiming the physical structure of the city that was built in its name, or alternatively, that the tree's root growth is a sign of something happening internally to the Erd tree that is causing it to expand beyond its normal parameters. Number 113. The West Capital Rampart Grace, one of the first graces you find inside Lanedale, overlooks a view of the entire city that is one of the game's best vantage points. From there, you can see the Erd tree towering directly above, the layered architecture of the city below, and in the distance, the outer walls and the plateau beyond. Standing there for a moment and just looking is something the game encourages by placing the grace at a viewpoint rather than in a room. It is the game saying, "Stop and look at this. We built something here. Take it in." Number 114. Queen Marika's throne room in Leyndell is an enormous space that is empty by the time you reach it. The throne itself is intact, grand, and unoccupied, which is one of the most significant images in the game. The throne was built for Marika, the God Queen, the divine human who held the Elden Ring and governed the world. She is gone, her body broken and held in the Erdtree, her ring shattered, and her throne sits there waiting for an occupant who may never come back. The emptiness of the throne is not just political, it is theological. Something that was supposed to be permanent has been interrupted. Number 115. The Elden Throne, the second throne found deeper in Leyndell, is the seat of the actual Elden Ring's physical manifestation. This throne is deeper and more sacred than Marika's own, and reaching it requires passing through the bulk of the capital's defences. The two thrones, one for the god and one for the source of divine law, being separate from each other, is a detail that says something about the structure of power in the lands between. Marika sat in one place while the authority she derived her power from sat somewhere else. She was the representative, not the source. Number 116. The Margot, the Omen King boss fight takes place in the approach to the Elden Throne, and Margot is the true form of Margit the Fell Omen you fought in Limgrave. The detail here is not just the reveal that they are the same character, but the specific context. Margot has been guarding the path to the Elden Throne for the entirety of the game, first in the form of Margit blocking access to Stormvale, now in his true form blocking access to the capital's innermost sanctum. He is an omen, a cursed abomination, who has chosen to dedicate his existence to protecting the seat of the very institution that considers him an abomination. This contradiction is the core of his character. Number 117. If you look at the rooftops of Leyndell from certain vantage points, you can see that the city has multiple layers. There is the ground level, a mid-level, of elevated walkways and rooftops, and then the roots and branches of the Erdtree above that create a third layer. Navigating Leyndell vertically is just as important as moving horizontally, and players who think to go up rather than forward often find shortcuts and alternative routes that make the city feel less like a maze. The architecture was designed for a population that moved in multiple vertical layers simultaneously. Number 118. There are paintings throughout Leyndell that depict scenes from the city's history, including what appear to be coronation ceremonies and military victories. These paintings are not interactive and are easy to walk past without noticing, but they communicate a kind of official history, the golden age that Leyndell's rulers wanted to remember themselves as presiding over. The contrast between the grand celebratory paintings and the current state of the city, half empty, roamed by constructs and soldiers fighting a city nobody truly controls anymore, is a quiet comment on the gap between how power represents itself and what it actually produces. Number 119. The Altus Plateau also contains a location called the Old Altus Tunnel, which is another underground mine that can be accessed from the plateau's surface. The mining operation inside is for Altus Bloom, a material used in crafting that is described as a kind of crystallized grace energy specific to the Altus region. The fact that grace energy can be mined as a physical substance suggests that the entire Altus Plateau is saturated with a higher concentration of divine energy than the regions below it, which would explain both its visual warmth and the heightened intensity of the enemies and encounters found there compared to Limgrave or Liurnia. Number 120. Mount Gelmir is the volcanic region to the northwest of the Altus Plateau, and its connection to Leyndell is made through the Volcano Manor, which is the stronghold of a group of assassins who target Tarnished, serving the Erdtree. The volcano itself is ancient and was clearly active during an earlier geological period, but much of it is now cooled lava flows and igneous rock rather than active volcanic activity. The magma worms that inhabit the region suggest that whatever heat remains in the volcano's core is still enough to sustain creatures that need extreme heat to survive. The volcano is not dead, it is just dormant. Number 121. Gelmir's Grasp is a dangerous ravine on the approach to Mount Gelmir, where a full-grown magma worm guards the path. The ravine is called a grasp, which suggests the mountain is described as a living entity that reaches out and grabs travelers. The personification of the volcanic terrain as something that actively catches and holds things connects to how the region functions in gameplay. The ravine forces you into close contact with the worm in a narrow space, so the geography is quite literally doing what the name says. The mountain grabs you. Number 122. Volcano Manor is a large and ornate structure built into the side of Mount Gelmir, and its design is notably different from anything else in the game. It uses warm stone, open courtyards, and architectural detail that suggests luxury and comfort more than any of the other castles or manors. The people who built it were not soldiers. They were people who wanted to live well in an isolated location. The manor's current function as a base for assassins who invite you to join their murder contracts is a dark contrast to the obvious domestic comfort of the building itself. Number 123. The prayer room in Volcano Manor, where Tanith sits and coordinates the assassination assignments, has a door at the back that leads to the deeper dungeon of the manor. Behind this door is Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, one of the game's major boss encounters. Rykard is a demigod who offered himself to be devoured by a great serpent, and then merged with it, gaining the serpent's power in a kind of grotesque communion. The fact that he is at the back of a manor that runs assassination contracts suggests that Rykard's power was the foundation of the whole operation, and that Tanith and the other assassins were fundamentally his servants, even as they maintained the fiction of being an independent organisation. Number 124. The god-devouring serpent, which is what you fight in the first phase of Rykard's encounter, is described as a serpent ancient enough to have eaten a god at some point in the distant past. The implication that gods in the Elden Ring world are mortal in the sense of being physically consumable is one of the setting's more unsettling details. The Erdtree itself is a kind of organism, Marika is a physical being, and a snake old enough and powerful enough has apparently eaten something divine before. The Lands Between is a world where divinity has material weight and can be literally eaten. Number 125. There is a hidden path from Mount Gelmir down to the Altus Plateau that goes through the Seetherwater area, a region of hot springs and geothermal activity where the ground is warm to the touch. The Seetherwater River flows down from the volcanic region and deposits minerals in the plateau below, and the thermal activity in this area supports life that could not otherwise survive in the volcanic environment. The detail here is that the volcanic region and the plateau below it are connected by a water system that makes the harsh environment of the volcano livable around its edges, even if the centre is inhospitable. Number 126. The Hermit Village on the upper slopes of Mount Gelmir is where you find primeval sorcerer Azur, one of the two legendary sorcerers associated with the Comet Azur spell. Azur is frozen in place on a rocky overlook, staring into space, having apparently seen something in his pursuit of primeval knowledge that stopped him cold, possibly permanently. The village below him is populated by the remains of the sorcerers who followed him, also in various states of magical catatonia or hostile derangement. The village as a whole is a monument to what it looks like when intellectual ambition outpaces the mind's ability to process what it finds. Number 127. The full extent of Mount Gelmir, as shown on the map, spirals upward in a way that makes it look like the mountain was built or shaped rather than naturally formed. Its contour lines spiral concentrically, which is unusual compared to the other elevated terrain in the lands between. One possible reading is that the mountain is built over or around something ancient, and the spiraling shape is the physical record of a long geological history tied to whatever power originally established the volcanic activity here. The Erdtree has roots. Perhaps the volcano has a different kind of root going equally deep. Number 128. If you look at the Altus Plateau from the perspective of the Leyndell capital's position, you notice that everything on the plateau radiates outward from the capital. Like spokes from a hub, the roads, the ruins, and the positions of the various strongholds all relate to the capital in a way that suggests the capital was the centre of political organisation and everything else was built in relation to it. Even the regions that predate the current capital, like Mount Gelmir, are connected to it by routes that seem to have been established with the capital in mind. The whole plateau was organised around Leyndell. Number 129. Leyndell, after the story progresses to the mountaintops, has its outer area transformed by ash, which replaces the golden landscape with a pale white grey. This transformation of the environment is one of the game's more dramatic world state changes, and the detail worth noting is that the inner sanctum of Leyndell, the Elden Throne Room, remains unchanged by the ash. The exterior world changes dramatically, but the innermost chamber of power remains the same, sealed against the transformation happening everywhere around it. The ash that covers everything else stops at the threshold of the most sacred space in the city. Number 130. The capital outskirts area surrounding Leyndell has the Tree Sentinel enemies, which are mounted knights who patrol on horseback. The Tree Sentinel is the very first enemy most players encounter on the way out of the tutorial, except they encounter the normal version, not the harder version, near the capital. The capital's Tree Sentinels are larger, more ornate, and more aggressive, which communicates that the defences around the capital are proportionally greater than those in the outlying regions. The same type of guardian, scaled to the importance of what it is guarding. Moving now into Caelid, which is one of the most visually striking and lore-dense regions in the entire game. Caelid is a region destroyed by the Scarlet Rot, the result of a confrontation between Radahn and Malenia that scattered the rot across an entire territory. Number 131. The visual transition into Caelid from Limgrave, if you travel the land route rather than getting teleported there through the trap chest, is one of the game's most effective environmental shifts. The golden green of Limgrave becomes a rust red within a few hundred metres, and the sky above Caelid takes on a red-orange tint that does not go away for the entirety of your time in the region. The colour of the sky is a detail that establishes the contamination is atmospheric, not just topographic. The rot is in the air, it is in the weather, it has become the climate. Number 132. Caelid was once a territory with a functioning civilization. You can see evidence of this in the ruins throughout the region, which include farmhouses, military outposts, and what appears to have been a reasonably well-maintained road network. All of this was destroyed or abandoned after the rot spread. The roads still exist as physical paths, and following them takes you through the ruins of what was once a populated territory. Caelid is not a wasteland that was always a wasteland. It is a civilization that was destroyed relatively recently, and the specifics of that destruction are legible in the landscape. Number 133. Radahn's castle, Redmane Castle, sits in the southern tip of Caelid on a peninsula jutting into the Rot Sea below. Its positioning is almost defiant, a castle at the edge of a ruined territory, still manned, still functioning, still hosting the Radahn festival. The festival itself is a regular event held by Radahn's forces to honour him by inviting challengers to fight him. Because Radahn, having been driven partially mad by the rot he absorbed to prevent it from spreading to other regions, can no longer be spoken to or reasoned with. His soldiers show their love for him by sending others to fight him. Number 134. Radahn's law is one of the most unexpectedly tragic in the game. He consumed the scarlet rot to stop it from spreading beyond Caelid, knowing it would eventually destroy his mind. He held it inside himself, rather than let it reach the rest of the lands between. His soldiers call him the greatest general who ever lived, and when you look at what he sacrificed and why, the description feels earned. He is not a villain. He is a broken hero, wandering the southern beaches of Caelid, eating the corpses of fallen soldiers, his mind so degraded by rot that he no longer recognizes his own men. Number 135. The scarlet rot in Caelid's terrain is not static. If you watch it closely in certain areas, particularly near bodies of water, it appears to move slowly. The rot pools shift and bubble at their edges, and the red ferns and rot blooms grow visibly denser in areas with standing water. This suggests the rot is alive in some sense, spreading through moisture as a vector. The Caelid Lake in the centre of the region is completely contaminated, and watching the rot interact with the water gives you a sense of the mechanism by which it spreads. It is not a poison that sits in place, it moves. Number 136. Celia, Town of Sorcery, is a hidden village in northeastern Caelid that is hard to reach because of the magical barriers that seal its streets. The seals can be broken by lighting specific lanterns on top of Celia's towers, and doing so opens the doors to the town's deeper areas. This detail, that the town sealed itself behind magical barriers, suggests that the town's inhabitants anticipated the rot's arrival and tried to protect themselves by sealing the entrances. The barriers work. The town is partially intact inside them, but no one appears to have survived the rot anyway. Number 137. The Celia Crystal Tunnel, where you end up if you fall for the trap chest in Dragon-Burnt Ruins, is a mine inside the Caelid Cliffs, where Clean Rot Knights and Scarlet Rot have taken over the operation. The miners who once worked here are now either dead or transformed, and the crystal deposits they were excavating are still present, partially mined. The detail that someone continued mining in Caelid even after the rot began spreading suggests either that the crystals were valuable enough to risk the exposure, or that the miners were working here when the rot arrived and had no time to leave. The half-finished state of the mine argues for the latter. Number 138. The Church of the Plague in northeastern Caelid is exactly what the name suggests, a church dedicated in some way to the Scarlet Rot. The church sits near Malenia's Grace, and its dedication to the plague is connected to the outer god whose power the Scarlet Rot represents. Finding a church dedicated to what most inhabitants of the lands between would consider a catastrophe is a reminder that what is a disaster to most people is someone's religion. The outer god of rot is worshipped, and this church is one of its sites of devotion. Number 139. Grail, the oldest and largest dragon in the game, lies dying in Dragon Barrow, east of Caelid. She is massive, dwarfing all other creatures in the game, and she is surrounded by her children, smaller dragons who stay close to her. She cannot move and cannot attack you directly. Attacking her causes her children to defend her. The detail here is her scale and her passivity. She is too old and too worn to do anything but lie there and be slowly consumed by whatever is killing her. The dragons around her are behaving like protective family rather than like enemies, which is one of the game's quieter moments of unexpected empathy. Number 140. The Caelid Waypoint Ruins are a location on the road through central Caelid where a isolated merchant, has set up shop in the ruins of what was clearly once a waypoint on the main road. The merchant is still there, still selling, surrounded by the rot. The isolated merchants throughout Elden Ring are fascinating figures because they have clearly decided that the collapse of civilization is simply a change in market conditions and not a reason to stop doing business. This particular one, sitting in the middle of one of the most hostile environments in the game, takes that commitment to its logical extreme. Number 141. Fort Gale, in the western part of Caelid, is occupied by soldiers who appear to be serving Radan's forces rather than Godric's or any other demigods. The fort's defences are still manned even in the middle of the rot-devastated territory, which speaks to the loyalty that Radan inspires in his soldiers. These are people who stayed at their post in a territory that is slowly killing them, because that is what soldiers of Radan do. The fort itself is in relatively good shape compared to the surrounding landscape, suggesting the soldiers have been maintaining it actively rather than just surviving. Number 142. Caelid has an underground dungeon, accessible from its surface, called the War-Dead Catacombs, which is unique in that it is literally filled with the bodies and spirits of warriors who died in Caelid's battles. The spirits inside are still fighting each other, replaying the battles of Radan's campaigns in a kind of ghostly loop. The War-Dead Catacombs are one of the game's most haunting locations because the violence in them is not purposeful. It is just the residue of old violence that cannot stop repeating itself. The dead keep killing each other because they do not know how to do anything else. Number 143. The grace site at the Rot View balcony overlooks a sweeping view of Caelid's rot-covered lowlands. The name Rot View is descriptive to the point of being almost brutally honest about what the view offers. Someone named this location, knowing that looking out from this balcony means staring directly at the worst of what the Scarlet Rot has done to the land. It is possible this was named in a more ironic sense by whoever first established it, or it is possible the person who named it had been living with the rot so long that describing it as simply a view was perfectly natural. Number 144. The Caelid region has an unusual number of large red-flowered plants called Erdtree's favour, which seems contradictory given that the rot is supposedly inimical to the Erdtree's influence. The presence of Erdtree-associated plant life, even in a contaminated form, in Caelid, suggests that the Erdtree's power was present in the region before the rot arrived, and that some of it persists in a degraded state. The plants are red rather than gold, which one reading interprets as the Erdtree's golden energy being transformed or corrupted by the rot's influence without being destroyed entirely. Number 145. Melania's Halig tree, which is the result of Melania's blood seeding a new tree in the distant north, is her direct response to the Erdtree and the Golden Order. She grew her own tree. This detail, that a demigod built an alternative to the divine structure that defined the world, is one of the most significant lore points in the game, and the fact that it is located as far from Leyndell as possible on the map is not coincidental. Melania built her tree at the edge of the world, as far from the centre of the Erdtree's power as the map allows, as if distance was a necessary condition for her alternative to survive at all. Number 146. The rotted scarab enemies in Caelid are rot-infected versions of the teardrop scarabs found throughout the rest of the game. Where regular teardrop scarabs collect the memory residue of powerful beings, the rotted versions seem to have been corrupted by the Scarlet Rot's energy and transformed into aggressive creatures. The fact that the rot can infect creatures that were designed to collect and preserve memory is an interesting detail. It suggests the rot transforms things that were meant to be receptive and retentive into things that are aggressive and destructive. It takes what is meant to preserve and makes it dangerous. Number 147. The Cathedral of Dragon Communion in Caelid is the larger version of the Dragon Communion site from Limgrave, where you can exchange dragon hearts for powerful dragon-based incantations. The cathedral's scale, compared to the small coastal cave in Limgrave, suggests that Caelid has a much deeper history of dragon worship or dragon-related power. The presence of a full cathedral suggests this was an organised and significant religious site, not just a hidden cult location. Dragon communion was apparently a significant enough practice to warrant major architectural investment in this region. Number 148. Fort Faroth in eastern Caelid contains one half of the Dectus Medallion, the item needed to activate the Grand Lift of Dectus in Liurnia. The fort is guarded by deadly bats and a small dragon, and the combination of the medallion half being here and the other half being in Fort Hate in Limgrave suggests that the security protocol for the Grand Lift was deliberately split between two distant locations. Getting to the lift required travelling across a significant portion of the lands between, which functioned as a kind of de facto test of capability and determination for whoever wanted to use it. Number 149. Millennia's Arena at the top of the Halig Tree is not technically in Caelid, but is connected to Caelid thematically through the rot. Millennia herself is afflicted with the scarlet rot from birth and has experienced multiple scarlet rot blooms in her lifetime that she has survived. Her fight is one of the hardest in the game, and her second phase involves a full scarlet rot bloom that transforms the arena into a flower-filled rot environment. The transformation of the arena into something beautiful, flowers blooming from the rot, is one of the game's most complicated aesthetic moments. Something terrible made into something genuinely lovely. Number 150. The Nokron Eternal City Underground area is accessible after defeating Radan. This detail, that defeating Radan causes a meteorite to fall and open access to Nokron, is one of the most indirect cause and effect relationships in the game's geography. Radan had been holding back the stars with his gravity magic, keeping a specific celestial body from falling. When he is killed, the stars move again, and one of them falls and opens the path to Nokron. The underground city was inaccessible, not because of a physical barrier, but because a demigod was actively holding the sky in place above a specific point in Caelid to prevent this from happening. Now we move to the underground regions, which are some of the most visually extraordinary and lore-significant locations in the entire game. Number 151. Siofra River, the underground region accessed from Limgrave via a well, is one of the game's most beautiful locations. The ceiling is a vast dark expanse filled with something that looks like stars, and the ground level is covered in ancient ruins, wandering animals, and a river that flows through the middle of everything. The scale is much larger than you expect from an underground location. The ruins in Siofra River predate almost everything on the surface, and the style of architecture is different from anything found above ground. This civilization existed before the Eard Tree faith was established, before Leyndell was built, before the Golden Order. Number 152. The stars visible on the ceiling of Siofra River are one of the most discussed details in the game's community. They are not real stars in the sky sense. They are described as something more like luminescent points in the ceiling of an enormous cavern. But they behave like stars, maintaining consistent positions and casting a soft light on the ruins below. The effect creates the sensation of being outside at night, in a vast flat landscape, which is deeply disorienting because you entered this place by going down a shaft. The underground pretends to be the outside world, and it does so convincingly enough that you forget where you are. Number 153. The deer in Siofra River are one of those details that stops you cold the first time you see them. In every surface region, deer are targets for hunting or simply background animals. In Siofra River, they wander the ruins peacefully, avoiding combat, existing in the ancient space as if they have always been there. One possible reading is that these animals descend from a population that has lived underground for so long that they have adapted to the underground environment. Another reading is that the underground realm has a connection to the natural world that goes deeper than anyone on the surface is aware of, and that some animals feel that pull and go down. Number 154. The ruins in Siofra River include what appears to be a ritual circle of large stone tablets with symbols on them that connect to the various outer gods mentioned elsewhere in the game's lore. The circle is used in a summoning ritual that is part of Rani's questline. The fact that a ritual site connected to outer gods, beings from outside the lands between, exists deep underground and predates the surface civilizations suggests that the underground civilizations had knowledge of and relationships with forces beyond this world long before the Erd Tree was established. The Erd Tree faith replaced something older, not created something from nothing. Number 155. Nokron, Eternal City, accessed from the meteorite crater opening in southern Caelid, is a massive underground city that appears to be a kind of preserved or eternal duplicate of Leyndell. Its architecture and layout closely mirror the capital above, and the explanation, suggested by the lore, is that Nokron was built at the same time as Leyndell, as an underground counterpart. The Eternal City concept, cities maintained in a kind of suspended state underground, is connected to the Finger Maiden practice and the Two Fingers' desire to preserve things exactly as they were at the height of the Golden Age. Nokron is a time capsule of the past built by people who never wanted that past to end. Number 156. The Mimic Tier boss in Nokron is one of the most conceptually unsettling encounters in the game. It creates a perfect physical copy of your character, equipment and all, and fights you using your own weapons and spells. The Mimic Tier is described as a creation of the Eternal City, a substance capable of assuming any form it comes into contact with. The fact that the underground civilization of Nokron developed this technology, the ability to duplicate living beings, says something about what they were trying to achieve. If you can copy something perfectly, you can preserve it. And if you can preserve it, nothing has to end. Number 157. The Fingerslayer blade found in Nokron's ancestral woods is the key item Rani needs for her questline. The blade is described as something capable of injuring the Two Fingers, the divine intermediaries of the Erd Tree. The fact that it exists in Nokron, a city that predates the Erd Tree's dominance, suggests it was made by people who lived under a different divine order, and who viewed the Two Fingers not as sacred messengers, but as enforceable representatives of a power they may have resisted. The blade as a weapon against divinity, having survived underground for ages, says something about how deep the opposition to the Erd Tree's order goes. Number 158. The ancestral followers in Nokron and Syofra River are enemies that look like human shamans, but are described as followers of a pre-Erd Tree practice that involved communing directly with the natural world. Their design, which incorporates antler-like features and organic textures, distinguishes them from every other faction in the game, and connects them to the idea that the lands between had a spiritual life before the Erd Tree established its monopoly on divine connection. The ancestral followers worship the ancestral spirit, which one possible reading suggests is an older deity or force that the Erd Tree faith displaced rather than replaced. Number 159. The Ansel River, another underground area, is connected to the surface via a well in Liurnia. Here you find a miniature version of Rani, a small doll that talks to you if you speak to it repeatedly. This miniature Rani is a kind of remote presence, a way for Rani to communicate without physically being present. The Ansel River leads toward Nokstella, the Eternal City's twin sister, and finding the miniature Rani here suggests that Rani has been actively using the underground pathways for her own purposes, moving through the hidden networks beneath the world that most surface dwellers do not know exist. Number 160. Nokstella, the second Eternal City, is even more elaborate than Nokron and sits deeper underground along the Ainsel River. Its geography includes elevated waterways, enormous stone architecture, and carvings that depict the star-reading practices of its ancient inhabitants. The connection between Nokstella and the moon is made explicit in the presence of silver tears and the rune of the unborn, which Rani seeks here. Nocstella's relationship with the moon suggests its inhabitants were moon worshippers, or at least moon-oriented in their spiritual practices, which connects directly to the Carian royal family's own lunar faith above on the surface. Number 161. The Lake of Rot in the Ainsel River area is a massive body of scarlet rot liquid sitting in a basin far underground. Reaching it requires navigating through an area that is already contaminated, and crossing the lake itself requires rot resistance. The presence of the Lake of Rot deep underground, far from Caelid's surface rot, confirms that the scarlet rot does not originate from Caelid's surface. It comes from below and erupts upward. The lake is one of the sources, sitting in a cavern so deep that nothing has been able to contain or address it. Whatever infected Melania and devastated Caelid came from somewhere like this. Number 162. The Grand Cloister at the end of the Lake of Rot leads to Astel, Naturalborn, of the Void, one of the game's most visually extraordinary bosses. Astel is described as a being from space, not from the lands between at all, that fell from the sky in ancient times and has been living underground ever since. The fact that a space creature has been living in the deepest underground areas of the lands between for thousands of years raises the question of what else came down from the sky that nobody has found yet. The underground is the oldest part of this world, and it has been collecting things from outside for a very long time. Number 163. The Deeproot Depths, accessible through a coffin in the Lake of Rot, is an area that exists literally among the roots of the Erd tree. These are not the shallow roots you see breaking through surfaces in Limgrave. These are the deep roots, enormous structures as large as city blocks, forming a labyrinthine underground landscape that the Erd tree uses as its anchor. The Erd tree is not just a tree, it is connected to the entire underground, and its root system is so vast that there is a navigable region inside it. The tree is the world's skeleton. Number 164. Deeproot Depths contains Fia's resting place, where she's been trying to help Godwyn the Golden, Marika's son, who died in a unique and specific way. He had his soul killed without his body dying, which reversed the normal process of death and left him in a state of bodily existence without spiritual presence. Fia wants to give him a proper death using the Rune of Death, because the state he is in, dead in soul but alive in body, his body continually growing and merging with the roots of the Erd tree, is causing corruption at the foundation of the world. Finding this situation deep in the Erd tree's roots suggests the corruption of the divine order starts at its root. Number 165. The Prince of Death's throne in Deeproot Depths is where Fia awaits you. The throne sits at the centre of a vast root structure, surrounded by Godwyn's slowly spreading body, which has fused with the Erd tree's roots, and now resembles a massive pale growth spreading across the cavern floor. The throne itself is described as a seat from which the authority over death can be wielded, and Fia's ambition to use it to give Godwyn a real death is simultaneously an act of mercy and an act of apocalyptic ambition. She wants to give the right kind of death to someone who is stuck in the wrong kind of life. Number 166. The Mogwyn Palace is accessed either through a portal in the consecrated snowfield or through White Mask Vara's questline. Its position on the map, which is underground, and to the west of the map, makes it one of the most geographically isolated major locations in the game. The palace sits in an enormous cavern filled with blood-red liquid that Moog, Lord of Blood, has cultivated as an offering to his outer god. The aesthetic of the palace is completely distinct from everything else in the game. Red, ornate, formal, with a kind of terrible beauty that suggests Mog was creating something he believed was genuinely holy. It is the most beautiful location in the game and the most disturbing simultaneously. Number 167. The blood pools in Mogwyn Palace are filled with the bodies of silver tears that have been transformed by the blood. Silver tears are the shape-shifting creatures from the eternal cities, and their presence in Mohg's bloodbath suggests either that Mohg specifically collected them for this purpose, or that they were drawn to the palace by the concentration of blood power. The image of creatures designed to preserve the living being dissolved into a god's blood offering is striking. Mohg did not distinguish between living creatures and sacrificial material. Everything that came to his palace became part of the offering. Number 168. Mohg's arena, where you fight Mohg Lord of Blood, is constructed to look like a formal arena with pillars and a throne at the back, suggesting that the entire fight is a ritual performance rather than a combat in the ordinary sense. Mohg watches you approach with what appears to be satisfaction. He's been waiting for a worthy sacrifice or a worthy opponent. The ritual of blood and the ritual of combat are the same thing in his theology. The fact that a cocoon sits at the back of the arena containing Miquella, the most beloved of demigods, tells you that Mohg believes he is building a dynasty. Number 169. Moving to the mountaintops of the Giants, which is the region beyond the capital and above the Altus Plateau, accessed via the Grand Lift of Rold. The mountaintops are one of the game's most dramatically desolate areas, covered in snow and ice, populated by fire giants, and the ruins of the ancient civilization of those giants. The scale of the ruins here, stone structures built for beings many times larger than a human, communicates something about the history of the conflict between the Erdtree faith and the giants. This was the homeland of a people that the Golden Order destroyed, and the ruins of their civilization are still here because nothing has been done to clear them. Nobody came back to clean this place up. Number 170. The giant crusher weapon found in the mountaintops is described as a weapon made by the giants themselves, so large that a human using it is essentially carrying a boulder on a handle. The existence of weapons scaled for giants in the ruins of their civilization confirms that the giants had a material culture, tools, weapons, buildings. They were not just enormous monsters, they were a civilization with their own technology and infrastructure. Everything that was built here was built to giant scale, which means the ruins on the mountaintops are not just ruins of defeated enemies. They are the ruins of an entire way of life. Number 171. The fire giant boss is the last surviving member of the giant civilization, kept alive by the Golden Order specifically to be the keeper of the Forge of the Giants, where their Erdtree can be burned. This is one of the more cruel details in the game's history. The Erdtree faith destroyed the giants, but kept one alive, cursed, imprisoned by chains of faith, as an instrument of the Order's own potential destruction. The fire giant serves as a kind of key, something that should not exist but was preserved because its function was necessary. The Order's desire for control extended even to the mechanism of its own possible end. Number 172. The Forge of the Giants at the summit of the mountaintops is the location where the Erdtree can be set on fire using the flame from the Giant's flame. The Forge is ancient, pre-Erdtree, built by the Giants for purposes that predated the current Divine Order. The detail that the only way to burn the Erdtree is to use a fire that the Giants maintain suggests that whoever designed the rules of the world built in a specific and limited method of destroying it. The Erdtree's immunity to ordinary fire and its vulnerability to Giant's flame is a kind of divine copyright protection. If you want to destroy this, you have to use the one tool that was specifically made for it. Number 173. The Snow Valley ruins on the mountaintops are the ruins of a settlement that appears to have been built by humans rather than giants, suggesting that the mountaintops were once more hospitable and that people lived there before the current era. The ruins are partially buried in snow and ice, and the structures that remain visible are simple and domestic, farmhouses and storage buildings rather than fortifications. Someone farmed here once. Whatever drove people off the mountaintops happened long ago, and the snow has been quietly burying the evidence of their presence ever since. Number 174. Haligtree Roots. The lowest section of the Haligtree dungeon is directly connected to the underground root networks we discussed in Deeproot Depths. The Haligtree's roots descend all the way into the same underground layer where the Erdtree's roots reach, and this proximity suggests that the two trees, Miquella's Haligtree and the main Erdtree, are physically competing for the same underground territory. The roots of both trees are reaching toward each other in the underground, which is either a metaphor for their theological conflict or a literal description of how divine trees in this world establish their territory. Number 175. The consecrated snowfield is a region accessible through a secret path in the mountaintops, requiring a hidden medallion to access the grand lift of Rold's secondary mechanism. The snowfield is described as a place where the Erdtree's grace falls like snow, accumulating on the ground. The visual of grace as falling snow is one of the game's most beautiful visual metaphors, and walking through the consecrated snowfield in the blizzard conditions the region imposes is one of the more meditative experiences in the game. You can barely see, you can hear the wind, and somewhere ahead of you is the most dangerous content in the game, hidden in the white. Number 176. The yellow annex tunnel in the consecrated snowfield is a mine in the ice, and the workers inside appear to have been mining smithing stone and star fulgite, materials associated with ancient weapons and star-related smithing. The presence of a mine specifically for star-fallen materials in the most remote part of the map suggests that either stars fall more frequently in this region due to some celestial geography, or that the mine was established specifically to exploit a large deposit that fell here long ago. Either way, the miners were doing very specialized work in a very remote location. Number 177. Ordina, liturgical town, in the consecrated snowfield, is a beautiful frozen city, preserved in a state of perfect stillness. No enemies roam its streets. Candles burn everywhere, but nothing disturbs the flame. The only disturbance is the albinoric archers on the rooftops, who attack anyone who enters the town's centre. This frozen, candle-lit, eerily still town is the gateway to the Haligtree, and it was Miquella's creation. The liturgical in its name suggests it was meant to be a place of worship. The perfect stillness suggests something happened here that stopped time, or at least the feeling of time, in its tracks. Number 178. The Black Knife Catacombs in Altus Plateau contain an enemy called the Cemetery Shade, and the specific connection here is to the Black Knife Assassins, who murdered Godwyn the Golden on the Night of the Black Knives. The catacombs associated with the Black Knives are built in the same architectural style as the other Golden Order catacombs throughout the game, which suggests the Black Knife Assassins were initially connected to or operating within the established order rather than as pure outsiders. The event they participated in was an inside job, and the infrastructure that supported it was built from within. It does not raise, it corrupts. The buildings stand, the people are gone. Number 273. Raya Lucaria Academy has a system of elevators and rotating platforms built into its interior that allows for vertical navigation through the tower structure. These mechanical systems, which use magic to function rather than steam or electricity, represent the Academy's practical application of magic to daily infrastructure. This is easy to overlook in the context of a game full of dramatic magic, but it is a significant detail. The most advanced magical institution in the lands between used its knowledge to build comfortable and functional buildings. The magic is not just for combat, it runs the plumbing. Number 274. Patches, after completing his questline in Elden Ring, sends you a letter and a gift. The gift includes a stone sword key, and the letter is written in Patches' characteristically self-interested voice. The detail here is that Patches mails you a letter. The postal system implied by this still being operational is fascinating. Someone is carrying letters in the lands between during the middle of a shattering of the divine order. The infrastructure of correspondence still works somehow, even when everything else is in chaos. Patches relies on it. Number 275. The troll enemies found throughout the lands between in various forms, from the road trolls pulling carts to the Lanedale knights, are distinguished by whether they appear to be in service to someone or acting independently. The road trolls pulling carts are among the most interesting. They are still performing labour, still moving carts along the road, but there does not appear to be anyone directing them anymore. They were trained or built to do a job, and they continued doing it even after the institution that employed them ceased to exist. Loyalty and inertia are sometimes indistinguishable. Number 276. The rooftop of Raya Lucaria Academy has a crow enemy that drops a Newman's rune when killed. Newman's runes are described as energy from beyond the lands between, accumulated in a human body. Finding one in the possession of a crow on the Academy's roof is a small mystery. Crows in Elden Ring seem to have a special relationship with valuable items, dropping them when killed throughout the game. One possible reading of this is that crows are teardrop scarab equivalents in some way, creatures that naturally accumulate significant residual energy without anyone understanding why. The crow on the Academy roof is just a crow, but it carries something ancient. Number 277. The sealed tunnel in the Altus Plateau is a dungeon that leads to the Divine Tower of East Altus, and it involves navigating through a series of stone sword key doors and rock-cut passages. The sealed tunnel is primarily a mining operation, and the path through it to the Divine Tower suggests the two things, mining and the Divine Tower, were connected in the original use of this space. Perhaps the miners were quarrying material for the tower's construction, or perhaps the tower was built into the same geologic structure that made mining viable here. Either way, the tunnel and the tower are parts of the same ancient project. Number 278. The Outer God lore, scattered throughout Elden Ring, describes beings from outside the lands, between who influence events within it through servants and artifacts. The distribution of Outer God influence across the map, the frenzied flame in the deep underground beneath the capital, the scarlet rot in Caelid and underground lakes, the blood god at Mogwyn Palace, the stars at Nokron, is a geographic record of invasion. These forces are at different physical locations in the world, and each location reflects something about the nature of the Outer God it hosts. The rot is diffuse and spreading. The blood is concentrated and ceremonial. The stars are deep and ancient. Each god has its own geography. Number 279. The Elden Ring shards, the great runes held by the demigods, are physically distributed across the map in the same pattern as the demigods' territories. This geographic distribution of divine lore is one of the most important structural details in the game's world building. The lore of the land is not stored in one place. It was broken and scattered. To restore it means travelling to every corner of the map to recover each piece from whoever holds it. The quest to restore order is inherently geographic. It cannot be done from one place. Number 280. There is a spirit spring near the Grand Lift of Rold that allows you to bypass a section of the cliffside approach and reach the lift faster. This spring is easy to miss if you're following the road, because the road itself leads you to the lift without any difficulty. The spring is a shortcut for players who already know where they are going and want to skip the scenic route. The existence of optional shortcuts alongside the main paths is one of the navigation philosophies built into the world design. There is always more than one way to get somewhere, and the less obvious way is usually faster. Number 281. The Tibia Mariner enemies found throughout the lands between in coastal and lakeside areas are undead navigators, the spirits of sailors or sea-related figures who continue to row their ghostly boats, even on land. Their presence in inland areas, far from any navigable water, suggests either that they were bound to specific locations that were once coastlines, or that their existence as undead has disconnected them from the geography that would have made their boat rowing relevant. They row across grass and stone as if it were water. The maps they used were made for a world that no longer exists. Number 282. The large arena near the Grand Lift of Dectus in Liurnia has a statue of a warrior holding a sword above its head, and this statue is larger than the human-scale statues found elsewhere. The scale is important because it suggests this statue was built to commemorate something, to mark this location as significant, and to do so in a way that would be visible from a distance. The Dectus lift, as the primary access point between two major regions, was presumably a site that warranted formal commemoration by whoever controlled it at the height of the Lands Between's organised political era. Number 283. The Liurnia of the Lakes map, when you unfold it, shows the Academy's island position clearly at the centre of the lake, with roads and features radiating outward from it, like the spokes of a wheel. This radial organisation of Liurnia around the Academy is an important map-reading detail. The Academy was not just a building in Liurnia, it was the organising principle of the entire region. The roads go to it, the settlements cluster around it. The geography of Liurnia is a diagram of the Academy's influence, and reading the map that way tells you something about how power organises physical space. Number 284. There is a detail about the Nokron Eternal City's environment that many players notice but may not place. The silver liquid that fills the pools and low-lying areas of Nokron is silver tears in liquid form. Silver tears are the shape-shifting creatures found throughout the city, and the pools of silver liquid are either the source they come from or the state they return to when not animated. The entire floor of certain sections of Nokron is the pre-animated form of the enemies that will attack you. You are walking through the raw material of the thing that will try to kill you. The distinction between the environment and the enemy is thinner than it looks. Number 285. The map symbol for Sites of Grace, the Golden Wisps, appears on the Elden Ring map in a way that lets you track your progress through a region by counting how many you have found versus how many exist. Players who approach the map as a completion puzzle will naturally use the Grace Site distribution to gauge how thoroughly they have explored an area. The Grace Sites are not evenly distributed. They cluster around significant locations and thin out in the spaces between them, which means the distribution of Grace Sites is itself a rough map of where the significant content is. The map has a meta layer readable by counting the markers. Number 286. The Dragon Temple lift in Faramazula provides access between the lower and upper sections of the city, and if you look at the lift mechanism, it is clearly of the same design tradition as the giant lifts found elsewhere in the game, the Grand Lift of Rold, the Grand Lift of Dectus. This design consistency suggests either that all the major lifts in the Lands Between were built by the same builders, or that the lift technology was shared across different civilizations. The fact that the Dragon Civilization's lift looks like the Erdtree Civilization's lift raises the question of which came first and who borrowed from whom. Number 287. Millennia's room at the top of the Halig tree, just before her boss fog, contains a withered flower in a vase. The flower is described as something Miquella left for her before he was taken by Morg. This single withered flower in a vase, in a room decorated with care, in a tree that Miquella built for her, is one of the most quietly affecting images in the game. Miquella built an entire divine tree for his sister. He left her a flower, and by the time you reach it, both he and she are past the point where any of it matters in the way it was intended to. Number 288. The Crucible of Life, referenced in item descriptions connected to the Crucible Knight enemies, is described as the primordial source of all life in the Lands Between. the original organic fire from which the Erd tree eventually grew. The detail that the Erd tree grew from the crucible means the Erd tree is not the beginning of the world's divine order, but a later development from an earlier one. The crucible knights, who predate the Erd tree, represent a continuity with that earlier order that the Golden Order itself tried to suppress. The oldest soldiers in the world are still walking around in Leyndell, armour etched with the symbols of a faith that predates the current one. Number 289. There are blood-red flowers, called blood rose, near the Rose Church and in certain areas of Caelid that are associated with blood-related crafting materials. The visual detail of blood-red flowers in a game where blood is a significant thematic and mechanical element is one of those layered design choices where the environment communicates the lore. Blood roses grow where blood-related magic has been practiced or where blood has been shed in concentrated amounts. They are a kind of ecological record of where the blood god's influence has touched the land. Number 290. There is a particular view from the Altus Plateau, looking north toward the mountaintops where, on a clear in-game day, you can see a smear of reddish light on the distant horizon that corresponds to the direction of Caelid. This is a subtle atmospheric detail where the Scarlet Rot's light, faint but present, is visible even from the elevated vantage of the Altus Plateau. The world's contamination is visible from a distance if you know where to look and what to look for. The rot is not a local problem, its light reaches across regions. Number 291. The Ainsel River well in Liurnia drops you into the Ainsel River, which flows through a vast underground corridor with ruins and creatures lining its banks. The river is described as having once been navigable, and the ruins along its banks include what might be boat docks or stone moorings. The underground civilizations of the lands between had river transport, just as the surface civilizations had road and lake transport. The entire underground geography was organized around waterways, in the same way the surface was organized around roads and fortifications. It was a complete civilization with its own infrastructure. Number 292. The Ancestor Spirit and Regal Ancestor Spirit bosses in the Siofra River and Nokron areas are described as manifestations of the old spiritual order that predated the Erd tree, the natural spirit of life and renewal that the ancestral followers worshipped. Fighting these bosses, which are beautiful, massive, glowing creatures made of antlers and light, has a different character from fighting other bosses. They are not malevolent, they are simply there as they have always been, and you are the one who chooses to engage with them. The choice to fight something beautiful and ancient that has done nothing to you is the game's quiet way of asking what you think you're doing here. Number 293. The Erd tree's colour, visible from any open location in the game, is described in the lore as golden, but visually it reads as a complex warm light that shifts between yellow, amber and orange, depending on the time of day and the viewer's angle. This colour variation is a technical detail. The way the light renders on the tree's model changes based on atmospheric conditions, but it is also consistent with the lore's treatment of the Erd tree as something alive rather than static. A tree that glows differently depending on the time and conditions is behaving like a living thing rather than a static light source. The tree breathes. Number 294. There is a hidden underground passage beneath the Church of Inhibition in northeastern Liurnia that connects to a lower catacomb area. This passage is easy to miss because it is accessed through a well that is in an unusual location for an underground entrance. The Church of Inhibition's underground, having its own catacomb, suggests the church had a more complex function than just a surface worship space. What happened in the underground level of this church that was devoted to the Frenzied Flame's influence is not described directly, but the presence of dedicated underground space implies dedicated underground practice. Number 295. The Limgrave Tunnels, a small mine in central Limgrave, accessible from near the Argyll Lake, are the first underground mining dungeon most players encounter. The crystals mined here are used in smithing, and the miners inside have turned hostile, which raises the question of whether they turned hostile because of the Shattering's disruption of authority or because of something specific to the mines. The Limgrave tunnels also contain a stone digger troll boss, suggesting that at some point the mine was worked by giants or under giants' direction. The geology of the lands between connects the surface political history to the underground economic history. Number 296. There is a moment when approaching Lyondell from the south, where the road narrows and passes between two enormous stone statues of warriors, each holding a sword pointed at the ground. The statues are the same design as ones found throughout the Altars Plateau, and their positioning as gate markers for the final approach to the capital gives the road a formal character that separates the outer plateau from the city proper. These statues have been here through wars, through the Shattering, through everything. They have watched everything that has happened on this road, and they stand there still, swords down, guarding nothing that needs guarding anymore. Number 297. The map of the entire lands. Between seen from above in the concept art and in the full game map shows a roughly hand-shaped geography. The main landmass with its various regions and the positioning of the Erd tree at the centre is described by some community members as resembling a hand reaching upward. This interpretation connects to the 2 fingers and 3 fingers imagery that runs through the entire game. The world itself may be shaped like a hand, in which case the geographic symbolism runs all the way down to the topology of the landscape. The map is a body part. Number 298. The Erd tree's roots, visible at the deep root depths, extend in a pattern that radiates outward from a central point deep below the Erd tree itself. The root structure visible at this depth is much more elaborate and complex than the surface manifestations, and it includes what appear to be nodes or junctions where multiple large roots meet and intertwine. These junctions are the equivalent of the tree's underground support structure, the places where the Erd tree's underground architecture is most concentrated. Godwyn's body is found near one of these junctions, which is either coincidence or a reflection of the tree absorbing his remains in the area of maximum root density. Number 299. The Ordener liturgical town, visited briefly earlier, has a puzzle that involves lighting 4 fires at different heights of the town. The fires are placed at 4 cardinal elevations, which suggests the puzzle was designed to activate or sanctify the town through a specific ritual. The 4 fires at 4 levels of the town, creating an axis of flame from ground to rooftop, is a visual ritual. Lighting all 4 causes the Haligtree needle to become usable. The town was literally a key to the next location, and you activate it by performing the ritual its architecture was built to facilitate. Number 300. 300 is as good a place as any to note that the most consistent thing about the map of the lands between is how much it rewards looking. Almost every detail has been placed with care. The ruins are where they are for reasons that connect to history. The creatures are where they are because of ecology and lore. The names on the map connect to deeper stories. The light changes and communicates. The geography is built narrative, not just a level to traverse. And we are only at 300. Number 301. There is a ghost flame dragon in the mountaintops of the giants that appears as a world event and flies over the area, breathing ghost flame downward. The ghost flame dragon is associated with the ancient death magic that was present before the rune of death was locked away by Malekith. Its presence in the mountaintops, the region most directly associated with the giants and their ancient fire, suggests a thematic connection between death magic and the ancient fire traditions. The giants kept the flame. The ghost dragon carries death. Both of them are remnants of an older order that the Golden Order tried to suppress. Number 302. The Stargazer's ruins in the mountaintops are a small ruin complex associated with the practice of astronomical observation, evident from the broken telescope-like structures visible in the ruins. Someone was studying the stars from the highest point of the accessible world. This detail connects to the broader theme of celestial knowledge being significant in the lands between, from Noxtella's connection to the moon to the Academy's use of falling stars for their magic. The stargazers of the mountaintops were practitioners of the same tradition, working from the best possible vantage point. Number 303. The map symbol for Spirit Springs is a small upward arrow, and when you look at the full lands between map, these symbols cluster near specific terrain features, cliff edges, mountain slopes, and entrances to significant vertical spaces. The pattern of Spirit Spring locations is a navigational map of the world's vertical geography. Wherever you need to go, up in a way the road does not facilitate, there tends to be a spirit spring nearby. The world was built to be climbed, and the springs are the infrastructure of vertical exploration. Number 304. There is a road in Caerlid that runs south from Redmayne Castle toward the coast, and if you follow it, it eventually leads to a cliff overlooking the sea to the south of the continent. The road clearly continues beyond the current accessible map, suggesting it was once connected to something further south that is now either destroyed, unreachable, or simply outside the scope of the game's geography. The road ends at the cliff's edge, pointing out to sea, towards something the map does not show you. Number 305. The bell bearings found on defeated merchants throughout the lands between allow their wares to be purchased from the twin maiden husks in the Round Table hold. This system implies that merchants maintain their inventory through a physical object, the bell bearing, that could be transferred to another merchant's use after death. The specificity of this system, the exact way dead merchants continue to function commercially through the bell bearing, is one of those lore details that says a great deal about how the world thinks about commerce and continuity. Business does not stop at death in the lands between, it just changes hands. Number 306. The Windmill Village in the Altus Plateau is a location where women dance around windmills that are stained with blood. The combination of dancing women, windmills, and blood is one of the game's more disturbing environmental details. The women appear to be in a state of ecstatic ritual, and the windmills appear to have been used in a sacrificial practice. The Windmill Village sits in an otherwise mundane agricultural landscape, which makes the ritual practice happening there feel more unsettling by contrast. Agricultural areas in the lands between had their own religious practices, not all of them connected to the Erdtree faith. Number 307. The Altus Tunnel, a mine in the southern Altus Plateau, contains a boss called Stone Digger Troll, just as the Limgrave tunnels did. The recurrence of Stone Digger Trolls in mines throughout the game, from Limgrave to Altus, suggests a consistent historical use of these creatures as mine workers or overseers across different regions and eras. Stone Digger Trolls are described as workers rather than warriors, and their presence in mines at multiple geographic locations implies a civilization-wide practice of using them for underground labour. The troll labour infrastructure of the Golden Order extended across the entire map. Number 308. There are large stone buildings in the western Altus Plateau, identified on the map as the Old Altus Tunnel area, that are not accessible as proper dungeons. They appear to be storage facilities or processing plants for the mined materials from the tunnel. The fact that the industrial infrastructure around a mine is preserved alongside the mine itself, even though neither is still in operation, is one of those completeness details that makes the world feel like it was built for an actual civilization rather than for a video game. The whole industrial complex is there. It just stopped running. Number 309. There is a location in the shaded castle area called the Castellan's Hall, referencing the castellan who manages the castle. The castellan role in medieval history was a real position, the person responsible for the day-to-day management and defence of a castle. The shaded castle having a named castellan's hall within its structure suggests it was formally organised at some point, with clearly defined administrative roles, not just a fortification, but a managed estate. Whatever administrative order existed there is now gone, but its architectural record remains in the named hall. Number 310. The way the Altus Plateau's map shows the Leyndell capital in relation to the surrounding features, with the Eard tree immediately above the city and the wall system visible as concentric rings of defence, makes the city look like a target. The concentric rings of Leyndell's walls, drawn from above, resemble the target patterns used in marksmanship. This might be an unintentional visual consequence of the city's defensive architecture, or it might be a deliberate design choice to make the capital look, from the map perspective, like the thing everyone is aiming for. Either reading works. Number 311. There is a second entrance to the Halig tree that involves using the secret Halig tree medallion pieces, found in the village of the Albanorics, in Liurnia, and in Ordina, liturgical town, in the consecrated snowfield. The two-piece medallion system mirrors the two-piece Dectus medallion system and suggests the same architectural approach to access control was used for both lifts. The Halig tree was built with the same engineering philosophy as the Grand Lift of Dectus, which means Michela was familiar with the technical infrastructure of the Golden Order he was rejecting. He used the tools of the system he opposed to build his alternative. Number 312. The map of the mountaintops shows a very specific path from the Grand Lift of Rold to the Forge of the Giants that follows a series of natural plateaus and ridges. This path, the most direct route across the mountaintops, runs through the middle of the region rather than following the edges, which means it exposes you to the maximum amount of the region's content. The game's level design on the mountaintops is organised so that the natural navigation path through the terrain takes you past most of the significant encounters and locations. Following the landscape leads you to the story. Number 313. There are patches of crimson spill crystal tear visible in certain areas of the Altus Plateau and Leyndell that contain traces of HP restoring energy. These crystals form in places where the Golden Order's restorative grace has been particularly concentrated, and they persist as physical objects that can be harvested even now that the direct flow of grace has been disrupted. The geographic distribution of these crystals is a record of where healing was most abundant in the past, and that record is still readable in the landscape even after the source of the healing has been diminished. Number 314. The nomadic merchant in the Siofra River underground area is one of the game's most isolated merchant positions. He sits deep underground in an ancient city surrounded by hostile ancestral followers and creatures, and he is selling things. His calmness in this environment is either a testament to the practical benefits of neutrality as a commercial posture, or an indication that the merchants in this game have some quality that makes them invisible to the threats around them, or that they have arrangements with the inhabitants that we never see. The merchant is just there, doing business in the Eternal City. Number 315. There is a visual detail in Farum Azula where certain stone platforms have grass growing on their upper surfaces, ordinary green grass surviving in a floating city in the middle of a permanent storm. The grass, sustained by the stop-time nature of the location, suggests that Farum Azula exists in a bubble that maintains whatever conditions were present when time stopped. The grass was growing then. The grass is growing now. The normal forces of the world, wind, rain, time, have not changed anything here because time is not moving. The grass grows because it was growing. Number 316. The ruin-strewn precipice, which cuts through the cliff from Liurnia to the Altus Plateau, has a view near its top that lets you see back down the cliff to the lake region below. At this height, the academy in the middle of the lake looks small, its glowing facade reduced to a shimmer. The scale shift you experience climbing this cliff, from being surrounded by the academy's magical presence to looking down at it from above, is one of those perspective changes the game offers through its vertical geography. Things that seemed enormous become visible in their true context. Number 317. The Minor Dungeon. Tombsward Cave on the Weeping Peninsula has a troll boss who has been living in the cave for long enough that the cave ecology appears to have organised itself around his presence. The cave's layout, with certain areas clearly more thoroughly cleared and others left as natural, suggests the troll lives in the cleared sections and avoids the natural ones. Trolls in this game are not mindless. They have preferences, habits, territories. The cave's layout is a record of one troll's daily routine over a very long time. Number 318. The Malefactor's Evergale in the Weeping Peninsula is one of several magical prisons scattered throughout the lands between, each containing a being that was sealed away by the Golden Order for some transgression. The concept of magical imprisonment capsules distributed across the entire map is a remarkable piece of world building. The Order imprisoned dangerous beings and left the prisons standing in the landscape, visible and accessible to anyone who walked past. This was either incredibly confident or incredibly careless, and the fact that some of these prisons now sit in regions where the Order has no presence argues for the latter. Number 319. There are multiple Evergales across the map, from Limgrave to the consecrated snowfield, and the distribution of these prisons roughly corresponds to the geographic reach of the Golden Order's power at its height. You find them wherever the Order had territory, and the distribution of them is a map of the Order's historical footprint. The Evergales in the consecrated snowfield are the most remote, which suggests the Order's reach extended even to the most distant corners of the world during its period of greatest power. Number 320. There is a Knights Cavalry enemy type that appears only after dark in the lands between, patrolling specific roads. These mounted warriors ride routes that would have been their patrol paths during the Golden Order's era, and they appear only at night because they are associated with the night patrol tradition of the Order's cavalry forces. Their existence as night-only enemies is a game mechanic, but the lore reason for it, that they are creatures of the night patrol bound to their duty eternally, connects the mechanic to the world history. The game's day-night cycle has a lore basis in the behaviour of specific historical entities. Number 321. The Dragon Communion Cathedral in Caelid, mentioned earlier, has a unique grace site name that reflects something about the faith practiced there. Unlike the churches of Marika, which are identified by number and location, the Dragon Communion Cathedral is simply named for its function, the place where you commune with dragons. The directness of the name suggests a practice that did not try to dress itself up in the kind of institutional language the Erd Tree faith uses. Dragon communion is what it is. You eat dragon hearts and gain dragon powers. The cathedral exists to facilitate this, and the name says so plainly. Number 322. The spirit callers snail enemies in various dungeons throughout the game. Small snails that summon spirits when approached are one of the more distinctive enemy design choices in Elden Ring. Their existence as small, slow, helpless-looking creatures that can summon overwhelming numbers of powerful spirits creates a specific tactical dynamic. The lore suggests they were used as magical devices rather than as creatures in the traditional sense, tools of spirit summoning housed in mollusk-like shells. The fact that they appear in dungeons rather than in open areas suggests they were stored there, possibly by the Golden Order's spirit management practices. Number 323. There is a grace in the Siofra River underground called Siofra Aqueduct, and if you follow the aqueduct's route on the underground map layer, it leads toward the main river flow and connects to the broader underground water network. The aqueduct system, visible on the underground map, is more extensive than any individual dungeon shows, and tracing its route across the underground map reveals the infrastructure of a civilization that managed water across a very large underground territory. The eternal cities needed water. They built systems to have it. Those systems are still partially visible on the map. Number 324. There is a detail about the Church of Vows in Liurnia that connects to the broader political history of the game. The church was where the Carians and the Erd Tree faith made their formal alliance, and Miriel, the turtle priest, has been tending it since before the shattering. The detail here is that Miriel is still there. He is still tending the church, still available to teach incantations and sorceries, still politely welcoming visitors, even though the alliance the church commemorated is entirely dissolved. His continuation in his role in a church commemorating a broken compact is one of the game's saddest long-duration jokes. Number 325. There are ancient dragon smithing stones found in Farum Azula and in certain other ancient or inaccessible locations that are used to improve weapons to their highest levels. The fact that the most powerful smithing stones are found in the oldest and most remote locations in the game is both a gameplay reward for exploration and a lore detail. The smithing knowledge encoded in these stones is ancient, predating the Golden Order, and the Order would not have known what to do with them. The most powerful means of improvement are the oldest ones, hidden at the edges of the world. Number 326. The Spirit Grove ruins in the Altus Plateau are a small ruin complex with a particularly high density of spirit-related items, including golden seeds and sacred tears. The concentration of these items in one place suggests this was a formal spirit cultivation site, a place where the Erd Tree's energy was deliberately gathered and condensed for the purpose of producing usable quantities of its grace products. The ruins suggest the cultivation operation stopped when the Order collapsed, but the items it produced remain. Number 327. There is a specific spot in Lanedell near the Avenue Balcony Grace where you can sit and look across the city toward the Erd Tree while hearing only ambient sound. No enemies patrol this exact spot at this specific moment, and the view is unobstructed. This moment of stillness in the middle of a hostile city is either designed as a deliberate breathing point for the player or is an accidental consequence of the patrol patterns. Either way, it functions as a pause, a moment to look at the city before continuing to fight through it. The pause is the detail. Number 328. The underground chamber beneath the Divine Tower of Limgrave, accessible before the tower itself, contains a golem that has been frozen mid-step. This frozen golem is not hostile. It is simply stopped, one leg raised as if in the middle of a stride, and has been in this position for long enough that moss and growth have accumulated on its surface. The detail of a golem frozen in mid-motion, while everything around it has continued to change, is a specific kind of poetic image that From Software deploys throughout the game. The thing that was stopped in the middle of doing something, still doing it indefinitely. Number 329. The Dragon Temple in Farum Azula has a chandelier system visible in its interior. Enormous stone chandeliers with lit candles in a floating city in the middle of a perpetual storm. The candles are lit. The chandeliers were presumably lit when time stopped, and they have continued to burn since then, without going out, without being replaced, because nothing in Farum Azula runs out or changes. The perpetually lit candles in the stopped time temple are one of the more beautiful small details in the city. Light that should have gone out long ago still burns because nothing here ends. Number 330. The route from the Round Table Hold to any specific destination in the world is never a direct one because the hold is outside geography. Getting there and leaving requires the main menu, which is the in-game equivalent of sitting in grace and projecting yourself to the held space. The hold's disconnection from the map is itself a detail about the nature of the space. It cannot be reached by walking, it cannot be marked on the map. It exists outside the coordinate system that defines the world's geography. The Tarnished's home is unmappable. Number 331. The Elemer of the Briar NPC, found in the Shaded Castle's upper area, is an armoured figure who fights using a sword via telekinesis, letting the blades swing freely without physical contact. The detail here is not just the fighting style, but the location. Elemer is imprisoned in the Shaded Castle and is waiting for someone specific, his partner or counterpart, who holds something he needs. His situation, trapped in a hostile location, fighting everything that comes through while waiting for one specific person, is one of the game's smaller but more resonant character studies. He has been waiting there for a very long time. Number 332. The Millennia Set armor description notes that it was made to prevent the scarlet rot from spreading further into the body of its wearer. The engineering specificity of this armor, made not for combat protection but for biological containment, is a remarkable detail. Millennia has been wearing this suit not as battle armor but as a medical device, a full-body containment system for a disease that has been trying to consume her from the inside since birth. The most dangerous warrior in the game is also, at all times, managing a chronic medical condition. Number 333. The full extent of the Haligtree's trunk is not visible to the player at any point during the normal gameplay. You see the roots at the bottom, you see the branches at the upper inhabited areas, and you pass through the midsection, but you never see the whole tree from outside at a distance that would allow you to take in its full scale. The Haligtree is always experienced from within, rather than from without, which is consistent with how Miquella designed it. It is not a landmark visible from the outside world. It is a place you're inside of. It does not have an exterior intended for observation. Number 334. There are Leyndell soldiers still patrolling the streets of Leyndell in both the original and Ashen versions of the city. Their continued patrol in the Ashen version, after the city has been devastated by fire and ash, is one of the details that underscores the game's theme of duty persisting beyond the collapse of what the duty was meant to protect. The soldiers patrol the streets of a dead city with the same regularity they would have patrolled a living one. The routine is the point. The routine is all they have. Number 335. There is an item in Elden Ring called the Seedbed Curse, which is found in specific locations throughout the game and is connected to the bodies of people who died in a particular way, consumed by the frenzied flame, or used as a host for the frenzied flame's seed. The geographic distribution of Seedbed Curse locations is a map of the frenzied flame's historical reach, the places where its influence infected people strongly enough to leave a physical trace. The cursed locations cluster in places associated with the Order's suppression of those it excluded, which suggests the frenzied flame specifically targets those who have been abandoned by the official Divine Order. Number 336. The Raya Lucaria Academy seal, the large stone gate at the entrance to the Academy's grounds, is carved with both glintstone and celestial imagery. Stars, moon phases, and crystalline forms are combined in a design that tells you something about what the Academy values. The celestial imagery is not decorative, it is theological. The Academy's magic derives from the stars and the moon, and the entrance to the Academy announces this immediately through its visual language. You are entering a place that studies the sky. Number 337. There is a golem at the top of the cliff near the Divine Tower of East Altus that is stationary, not attacking or moving, simply standing and looking out over the Altus plateau. This golem does not engage unless you attack it first. Its posture and stillness suggest it was placed here as a watchtower guardian, a sentinel that looks outward rather than actively hunting. The idea that golems were used not just as combat tools, but as early warning systems placed at high points to observe the surrounding territory says something about the Golden Order's approach to defending its territory at multiple scales. Number 338. There are tree root structures visible in the cliff walls of the Siofra River area that appear to be eared tree roots, penetrating the ceiling of the underground and extending downward. The roots are clearly from above, and their presence in the underground, far below the surface, confirms that the eared tree's root system reaches all the way down to the underground civilization levels. The tree that dominates the surface is also present underground as a structural intrusion. The underground civilizations literally had to build around the roots of a tree they did not choose to have planted above them. Number 339. The Melania's flower, the scarlet Aeonia item associated with her boss fight, is described as her eared tree flower, the unique bloom that her rot produces. The concept that Melania produces a flower, that her body literally grows one when she reaches maximum rot bloom, connects her to the natural imagery of the eared tree while inverting it. The eared tree produces golden flowers. Melania produces a scarlet rot bloom. Both are divine in their own way, and both are connected to trees. The parallel between Melania's flower and the eared tree's blossoming is explicit in the item description and implicit in the visual design of her second phase. Number 340. There are traces of old Elden Ring architecture throughout Limgrave's ruins that appear to be from a period before the grafting that defines Godric's rule and before even the Stormvale settlement of the area. These proto-Limgrave ruins are the oldest stratum of the region's history, and they use the same architectural language as the underground civilizations in some respects. The possible connection between the surface ruins of Limgrave and the underground Siofra River culture suggests that the land was inhabited from below upward rather than built from the surface down. The underground was first. Number 341. The Albinauric wolfback archer enemies found in certain Liurnia and Haligtree areas are mounted archers, Albinaurics, who ride wolves or wolf-like creatures. This detail, that the Albinaurics use wolves as mounts, is consistent with Bled's existence as a wolf-adjacent being associated with Ranni, who herself has connections to the Albinauric community through the Haligtree. The wolf appears across multiple factions and storylines as a consistent symbol of service, loyalty, and the boundary between the human and the natural world. Number 342. There is a detail in the Ainsel River area where a large stone object called the Dragonkin Soldier drops from the ceiling of the underground space if you trigger its spawning condition. The Dragonkin Soldier fell from above and landed in the Ainsel River, which means it was somewhere higher up, near the surface, and came down. The concept of enemies falling from above in the underground spaces is one of those vertical geography details that reminds you the underground is not sealed off from the world above. Things move between the two layers, and some of them fall. Number 343. The Divine Tower of Caelid is visible from most of Caelid as a dark spire rising above the rot-covered landscape. Unlike the warm golden divine towers elsewhere in the game, this one is surrounded by the rot's red-orange atmosphere, which changes its visual character entirely. The tower looks like it belongs to a different, darker regime than the other divine towers. Its function is the same, restoring a demigod's great rune, but the environment around it frames it as something corrupted or at least contaminated. The Tower of Law stands in the middle of the lawless rot. Number 344. There is a specific underground area below Caelid that is not named on the standard map, but can be found by going into certain dungeon areas. This area contains enemies and items associated with the deep pre-Erdtree history of the Caelid region. The detail that Caelid has underground history predating the rot, predating even the current era's political history, suggests that the rot spreading through Caelid affected not just the surface, but the underground as well, and that the underground cultures that once thrived beneath what is now Caelid's wasteland were also affected by or resistant to the surface catastrophe. Number 345. The magma worm bosses found in multiple locations throughout the game, from the ruin-strewn precipice to Mount Gelmir, represent a category of creature that exists across the entire world rather than being specific to one region. Magma worms are described as incomplete dragons, creatures that were developing toward full draconic form but did not complete the transformation. Their presence across multiple regions suggests they are a natural creature of the lands between, rather than products of any specific civilization or magical practice. They simply exist in the volcanic areas of the world, doing what they do. Number 346. There is a path in western Limgrave that goes along the coast north of the Church of Ella and eventually reaches a small cove where a boat lies beached. The boat is empty, clearly having arrived recently rather than having been there for the duration of the game's historical events. One possible reading is that it is the boat on which a tarnished arrived at the lands between, the means of transport for someone who came from beyond the sea. The presence of a recently beached boat on Limgrave's coast is a detail that implies the world has been receiving visitors by sea, in addition to however you arrived. Number 347. The visual design of the two fingers, the divine intermediaries found at the Round Table Hold and other locations, is one of the game's most deliberately alien design choices. They are not beautiful or impressive. They are simple, pale, two-fingered appendages that radiate an uncomfortable feeling of uncanniness. The design of the divine messengers in this world as unappealing and unsettling rather than majestic seems deliberate. The power they represent is real, but nothing about how they look makes you want to follow them. The game asks you to notice the gap between the authority the Two Fingers project and the nature of the beings projecting it. Number 348. There is a grafted scion enemy placed at the top of the first room you enter in the tutorial area. This enemy is designed to kill you, and it does kill almost all first-time players. The grafted scion is a direct preview of what Godric represents, a being built from parts of others, assembled for power without any natural or organic coherence. Your first death in the game is at the hands of a Godric-adjacent creature. The tutorial's fatal enemy is a thematic preview of the first major obstacle. The game starts with the most important visual metaphor, number 349. The Erd tree's scale compared to the rest of the world is only fully apparent from certain elevated vantage points, particularly from the mountaintops of the giants or from Farum Azula. At those heights, you can see the tree as it actually appears relative to the landscape, and the scale is genuinely overwhelming. The tree is not just large, it occupies a significant fraction of the visible sky from those distances. Understanding the Erd tree's true scale changes how you think about every structure built near it. Leyndell's enormous buildings are tiny next to it. The entire human civilization of the lands between exists in the shadow of a tree. Number 350. The Prawn Shack in eastern Liurnia is a small hut by the water inhabited by a merchant who sells ocean and sea-related items. His presence at the water's edge, in a simple shack, selling materials connected to the sea, suggests a lifestyle built entirely around the lake and its resources. He is the only clearly aquaculture-focused merchant in the game, and the simplicity of his operation compared to the grand institutions of the Academy and the Carian Manor nearby makes him one of the more humanly relatable figures in the world. He just catches things from the water and sells them. He has probably been doing this his entire life. Number 351. The Caelid Divine Tower has a boss encounter inside it, the Godskin Apostle, which is notable because most Divine Towers contain only Godric-like constructs, rather than major combat encounters. The Godskin Apostle in this tower suggests the Godskin faction, which seeks to destroy the Erd Tree, had infiltrated or taken over this specific divine tower as a step in their campaign. The Tower of Divine Law in the rot-devastated region has been taken over by people who want to destroy divine law. The geography of the Kaelid Divine Tower is a microcosm of what is happening to the whole order. Number 352. There is a spirit spring in the middle of a large body of water in Liurnia that, if you ride Torrent onto the lake surface with sufficient speed, launches you upward to a platform that has a golden seed on it. This hidden platform, accessible only through a water surface spirit spring, is exactly the kind of multi-mechanic navigation puzzle that Elden Ring's exploration is built around. You need to know about Torrent, know about spirit springs, know that you can ride on the lake surface and be paying attention to what is directly above the spring. Each of these pieces of knowledge is available to a careful player. The combination of them reveals something hidden. Number 353. There is a large fort called Fort Lyde near the top of Mount Gelmir that overlooks the volcanic terrain below. The fort is occupied by fire monks, a warrior sect associated with the Giant's Flame and the Forge tradition. Their presence at a strategic high point on the volcano suggests either that the fire monks have been using Mount Gelmir's volcanic territory as their base for a long time, or that they moved into the fort when the Order's control of the region collapsed. Either way, the fire monks are maintaining the flame tradition in a volcanic fortification, which is the most logistically sensible location for them.